Watched his Batman Arkham video. It seemed okay for the most part. I had a couple disagreements, but no big deal. However, the couple times he ran into something difficult, he either just called it annoying or bad. Oh no. 10 hour Elden Ring critique. Come on.
First
he
phase.
makes it sound so dramatic. Like, it's just delayed attacks. Going out of its way to be something it wasn't. Like, why is it this, like, essence spiritual bullshit all the time with these people? I mean, like, that's like this is just the arrogance thing. It's so gross. Like, everybody has the ego, and it's just like, so they assume, like, the developers are trying to tell you to hit trade because it's harder to dodge now. It's like, no. You can still play no-hit if you really want to. It's just gonna take more time. There's the infamous section. The one I wish I could... Are you kidding me? I have to know.
Queen of the full moon.
Are you being serious? Read the comment. They're one of us? Okay. Oh, you read the comment. Oh. I thought you wanted me to read... I mean, I read the last one out loud. It seems only fair. Because it is another, like, fairly, like, long... Multiple sentences, at least, you know? Sown Mind 1786 says, I'm glad I wasn't the only one getting angry at these people. I nearly keeled over trying to get through Loveless's garbage, let alone Feeble, Dmod, and the myriad other idiots. Yeah. We gotta check out Loveless's video, because I don't even know who that is. What? Is this about Loveless? Or... I don't know. I searched, like, just general summaries of the DLC, or, like, analyses, and I didn't see this person's come up. Oh, they don't have many subscribers. Interesting. Oh, my fucking lord. Holy Christ. Okay, hang on. No, we need to fully... I'm not going to watch this right now. Maybe we will someday, but we need to just look at the... It's not often that somebody's brainworms about these games bring me to a point where I'm speechless, but I mean, fucking 10 hour Elden Ring critique. Come on. Come on, even I couldn't do this. I would have to force it. I could maybe do 6. Oh, this is just like a compilation of all of these, huh? Still, though, like, my god. Alright, well, okay, well that's the sequel to the Joseph Anderson one, I guess. No, I should do this. This will be the training wheels for the Joseph Anderson one. That's what this will be. Are they dumb? This person? Like, because the commenter seemed to imply that. No idea? Alright. I guess I do admire the dedication. I mean, maybe that's how long a proper critique of the game should be. It would be kind of cool. I don't think this is going to happen, mind you, but this guy Mesmer thinks is bad, or this guy thinks Mesmer is bad, actually. 28. That's alright. I was literally in the process of saying it would be nice to find somebody who actually has good takes about the game and be able to, like, be like, oh, subscribe to this person. They don't get enough attention. But no, okay. A great shield gamer. Oh my god. I really feel a special type of fucking hatred well up inside of me at people who play with, like, really easy mode builds and still bitch about the DLC's difficulty. Oh my god. Like D-Mod and his fucking dual great stars. Great shield gamer. There's nothing wrong with that, necessarily. Unless your chat told you it was the way to surely win the DLC. Just hypothetically, you know, if that happened to anybody out there who was convinced it was too hard to be fun. You know, that's one thing that I actually think is a pretty consistent problem, like, amongst all the From Software games, is, like, their boss arena design could be better, just mechanically speaking. I mean, it's not really that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. It's just like a thing that I've noticed. It gets kind of a big deal whenever I'm fighting the fire giant. The Joseph Anderson mid-ear boss run back timer thing is something that I have to resist bringing up like every 5 minutes. I know I'm doing it right now, but I've thought about it like constantly. There's nothing wrong with complaining about it. It's just like, he makes such a big fucking deal about it. Because I think it's annoying too. But like, whatever. See the video. When I was going back through and editing that, the video that I posted today, I feel like I let a lot of things slip by me that were like specifically along the lines of the stuff that, fuck me, of like the guideline that I wrote up for myself. So I'm kind of excited to go over that again and see the pattern fucking execute more times. Because I'm sure it will. It seems to be just what he does. Oh, I still have to do the Feeble King follow-up video. I still have to edit that one, too. Keep forgetting about it. I feel like that's like the hardest that I went in this whole saga so far. Well, I did yell at Theo quite a bit, too, for the first half of his video. Probably because Feeble King was the harshest and the most, fucking confidently wrong. Joseph Anderson's suck off walk back was wild. It was. Oh man. He really... Well, it wasn't even a full walk back because he still sucked them off. It's just, it must be very like distressing for him, the position he's in with Joseph Anderson, where he like fucking puts him up on a pedestal but also like disagrees with a lot of the shit he says. I feel like that's why Feeble King's videos can be so confusing sometimes, because it's like he's not even really sure what he wants to say. Maybe it's off-putting for me to engage in like light psychoanalysis on all of these people, but it's just because I feel like there's something wrong with all of them. You have to understand. I love how I started that statement like it was I was gonna try to ease like make anything better, and I just fucking doubled down. Oh. Everyone who disagrees with me and is mentally ill. No, not that. It's just I don't know. It's just the very particular... I guess maybe Joseph Anderson isn't like this, but Feeble King and Democracy definitely are. Where their egos are just very wrapped up in it. Joseph Anderson is kind of the same way, but I feel like it's a little different for him, where he kind of buys into his own hype as like this very supposedly prestigious game critic. Oh, Sif. I don't want to cry. I'm going to try to kill her quick. Poor baby. Alright, we did it. Sorry, Sif. I don't know, I feel like all the like avenues of charitability I start to think about giving to Joseph Anderson kind of dry up when I think about them a little more. Because I keep wanting to say like maybe he's just cynical from having talked about the video game industry as much as he has, but he hasn't. He has like barely any videos, as we've said a bunch of times. And like that's why he always assumes the worst of From Software, because he's just like, you know, bitter. But I don't think that's it, because he barely has any videos again. That Loveless guy is interesting, really? Alright. Well, give me a brief rundown of what I'm in for, HackTech. Also, hello, HackTech. Good to see you. HackTech, what'd you find? I only looked at one thing, came to a correct, probably, conclusion. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, thinking Mesmer sucks is a pretty out there take. So I feel like you're probably not wrong, Radius. Yeah, because even like the people who have problems with like the boss design generally of the DLC tend to think Mesmer is one of the better ones. That's one I haven't really heard yet, that Mesmer is a standout, like, bad example. That's why it was my barometer. Yeah, that makes sense. It does. It makes sense. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, all the hacks praise fucking Mesmer and Midra. That's how it goes. Mesmer is a top 10 boss, in your opinion? Yeah, that's... I don't know if I'd say that, but just because I'm like... I'd want to actually make the list to say whether or not he is. But yeah, he's definitely like really fucking good. Top tier, for sure. Watched his Batman Arkham video. It seemed okay for the most part. I had a couple disagreements, but no big deal. However, the couple times he ran into something difficult here, they just called it annoying or bad. Oh no. Yeah, definitely a qualified enough person to make a 10-hour criticism of the game, the hardest game in the game series that's known for being hard. Ooh boy. That certainly doesn't bode well. I really don't want to come in like too loaded with preconceived notions, but fuck. I think we may have just blown that. No, what? This inbred thinks Radagon is bad? No, wait, what? Like, is it Elden Beast related? Because everybody wants to group them together so that they can shit on Radagon. Radagon is so good. Their separate section. Jesus Christ. Motherfucker's got Mimic using dragon spells in his Radagon footage. This is a bit. I mean, like, that's how I felt about Feeble King's DLC video, too. But it ended up being real because his follow-up was a double down. So, I don't know. Whatever. Even if it is some sort of bizarre performance art and I end up playing into his gimmick, like, good. There's people out there who are actually that fucking dumb. This motherfucker has a 30-minute segment on waterfowl. I mean, I can't hate too much because I almost did something like that myself before I realized that would be a bad idea. I think even if I had made like a deep dive video on Maleenia like I wanted to all those months ago, like I don't think I could have talked about one attack for that long. Is the waterfowl hitbox bigger in phase 2? It might be. I don't think so. I think it's identical. It's been a long time since I've looked at that in the model, in the animation viewer. But I think they're literally the same attack, and the only difference is the visual effects, which don't have hitboxes in and of themselves. You could absolutely do a good 30-minute segment on waterfowl. You could break down the animation viewer thing for at least 5 minutes alone. The question is, does he spend 30 minutes saying me no like waterfowl? Yeah. We might as well just go for it, right? Difficulty, yeah. I mean, a video on difficulty from a person who doesn't like hard stuff in games, it should be great. About Elden Ring, too. That's maybe the most important part. Okay. Read the description. Something, something, get good, something, You're using OP things. Good. That's what you're supposed to do if you're not good. But you're not supposed to still have problems at that point. Or if you do, you're supposed to stop playing. You don't make a 10-hour critique pretending that it's not your fault, because I bet that's what's about to happen.
Could help you have fewer attacks.
I'm gonna need some coffee.
Arrived at what will be the last section of the critique dedicated specifically to gameplay, at least before the DLC, anyway. So obviously I've talked quite a lot about Elden Ring's difficulty, but up to this point, it's only been in the framings of whatever it was that I happen to be discussing. Okay. Now that I've talked so much about the gameplay, mechanics, enemies, and so on, I think it's high time I gave an overall assessment of Elden Ring's approach to difficulty.
Sure.
Elden Ring's approach to difficulty on the whole is extremely artificial, and the lack of balance has rightfully become a major point of critique.
Artificial, like a video game. Cool.
For many players. As a person who's been playing these games since the days of Demon Souls and has become so familiar with what it was that made the difficulty of those games.
I'm just free of the FromSoft curse, or I dispelled it quickly because I don't have the legacy, I guess.
As strong and fine-tuned as it typically was, the artificiality of Elden Ring's difficulty is glaringly transparent. FromSoft knew their games had gotten quite popular and so tried implementing a number of tricks to throw off their many veteran players. However, the end result was far from the cleverly...
Can I guess the tricks before he even... Delayed attacks, heal punishes, what else? Ground effects? I don't know. People seem to dislike those sometimes. It depends on who you talk to.
Once designed, they probably had envisioned.
Throw them out
First
in the
and
chat,
most obvious
like,
issue
they're all
that
the same, right?
many players will find is the constant use of delayed attacks. These are so unsubtle in their implementation.
There it is, delayed attacks. That's the first one.
Nuanced design they probably had envisioned. The first and most obvious issue that many players will find is the constant use of delayed attacks.
Well, that was like heal punishing was a specific example of that, but yeah, broadly input reading or animation reading.
These are so unsubtle in their implementation that it's become a meme amongst fans of the game just how ridiculous some of this shit looks. FromSoft has always done well at maintaining relative realism and internal consistency
they have
with
not.
the game.
That's so fucking dumb.
Every now and then things would get a little over the top, but you could tell even then that
FromSoft is like the over the top studio. That's like the thing they do.
It was never going out of its way to be something it wasn't. Be it a humanoid boss like German and the Nameless King, or a bestial encounter like Ludwig's First Phase or Medir, previous From games never tried to break the consistency of their world for the sake of throwing players off. Every now and then you might get the sluggish wind-up, like with Vendrick or the Adjudicator, but there was always a context that you could...
What the fuck does that mean? What the actual fuck does that mean? That's nonsense. Why did the gargoyle fight look like it was filmed in day for night? Is that just me? I wasn't paying close enough attention, but... Oh, wait. Yeah, why does
done well at maintaining relative realism.
It looks like there's some sort of weird filter over it.
First
he makes it sound so dramatic. Like, it's just delayed attacks, going out of its way to be something it wasn't. Fuck. Like, why is it this, like, essence spiritual bullshit all the time with these people?
Or Medir, previous From games never tried to break the consistency of their world for the sake of throwing players off. Every now and then you might get the sluggish wind-up, like with Vendrick or the Adjudicator, but there was always a context that you could intuit.
Every single fucking boss. How about?
It solely from the visual presentation.
I swear, I'm gonna go through this series again, and I should have been paying better attention as I've been going through Dark Souls, but every single boss has a delayed attack. The Capra Demon has one. The Taurus Demon has one. Like, I don't know what people's definitions of them are exactly. Is it just because, like, it's like, is the threshold it looks unrealistic? Because it's like, that's like so fucking subjective. Gargoyles have one, true. Asylum Demon, like, everything it does is delayed because it's so fucking slow, basically. Like, what does that even mean past a certain point? Delayed attack. And they all are. Typically. Because they all have tells. If they didn't, that would be... These games would suck.
Not holding his weapon up for as long as he does isn't contextualized in any way, and it makes the player raise an eyebrow when they take a significant chunk of damage from an attack that realistically shouldn't carry very much momentum. Like, yeah, no shit, dodging an attack is going to be difficult when there's no visual consistency to follow. Dodging is no longer...
There is, though. You wait for the snap. Like, there's two solutions to a delayed attack. You either strafe it or you wait for the actual attack to go off. The former option is a lot safer and can, in the base game, oftentimes easier. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's not contrary to the animation. Like, it's not. It's a bit unintuitive, but that's because they're trying to make it harder for you, because it's a progression of difficulty as we go through the games.
Of this, it's a memorization tactic that
Gargoyles do the same holding as Morgott and Margit. Yeah, I don't
develop
know.
and fine-tune.
They've literally been doing it since Demon Souls, and I'll say Dark Souls because I haven't finished Demon Souls. I'm not like that confident, but about that, but like I'm pretty sure probably since Demon Souls.
Repeated play. Developing an acumen for iframing individual attacks isn't the same as coming to understand the enemy as though it were a living, breathing entity that you're trying to overcome through skill and determination. Previous games may not have always hit the mark on this, but you could tell that it was what they strove for and why those games were as engaging as they...
I just don't think that it's any different, really. It's just like they have to pull more tricks on you, I guess. Maybe it feels more gamey. It doesn't really to me, personally. It just, like... I mean... Maybe the fact that I know the boss is accounting for my own stamina regeneration, in some sense, makes it feel a bit less, like, immersive. But I don't know, like, you have to do so much, like, in, like, thinking about it for that to happen. I don't know. fuck this guy.
They were. And another thing, can we cool it with the overtuned bosses and just utterly bloated kits? At a point, it just becomes
bloated
mundane
kits.
to deal with. Yep. There's the AoE, alright, there's the wombo combo.
So wait, how is it a bloated kit if everything is overly familiar to you?
Man grab, nice, okay.
Aren't they adding moves to not just have ones that you know how to deal with all of them already? Like, isn't that...
Okay, yeah, AoE number 2, cool. Alright, time for phase 2. And there's the one shot. Let's be honest, I just described at least
like
half
of my criticisms whenever I watch one of these is about the video making, but that's like, it's also because all the videos are fucking bad.
Elden Ring's 171 bosses, or 200 and...
Like, let me make a statement, then directly contradict it with the joke I want to make, because, like, we have no fucking ability. Like, once we dip into humor, there's no consistency anymore. You want to criticize the games for being inconsistent, like, check your own fucking video within the first 3 fucking minutes, you retard.
However many there are. More than anything, I think it's the non-stop happy feet wombo combos that annoy me most of all. None of these are Falco. They ain't Falco. Like, where are the breaks even at? Where are they at? Where are we at?
This is just a skill issue.
Oh
this
my
is
god. Wombo combo. No, but seriously, why can't these bosses just shut the fuck up and give me a
Twilight Zone,
turn?
you're going insane. Don't play the game.
The frustration in Elden Ring doesn't even necessarily come from the difficulty. It just gets annoying having to wait so long for a boss to finish their seemingly never-ending combos so I can finally get my one attack in, 2 or 3 if I'm feeling especially greedy. That's also assuming they don't have some sort of contingency in place to punish me for even trying, or that the lock-on actually keeps my focus on them. Honestly, half the punishes I even take anymore, not counting the stuff from the DLC because it's kinda new at this point, are completely self-inflicted, like knowing I can tank a hit or 2 and just not
gets hit out of a punish window on screen. Yeah,
not having the patience to wait for the boss to finish like we're in Fake Taxi or interviewing on the casting couch. Alright, I have needs too. It's really irritating to wait as long as 12 seconds for an enemy to stop attacking.
I feel like Malenia's waterfowl dance is almost a case of like it's almost doing the same thing that Godrick's like wind attack is, but just like to the most possible extent that it can. Because like if she didn't have waterfowl dance, do you have any idea how easy Malenia would be? Like, she would be nothing.
When my window for response is less than 1/12 of that. Like, imagine you're being interviewed, but you're immediately
in attack. Those two things are like propping up the difficulty of this fight. I think command. Oh, and the lifesteal, I guess too. But still, command grab might be a candidate for unnecessary I didn't even hear him say that. I'm barely paying attention to this. I keep having this problem because like I read these people as fucking dishonest, stupid, or whatever at the beginning, and then yeah, it is a fighting game term. That's true. Hang on, let's go back like 30 seconds and try to pay attention.
Also assuming they don't have some sort of contingency in place to punish me for even trying, or that the lock-on actually keeps my focus on them. Honestly, half the punishes I even take anymore, not counting the stuff from the DLC because it's kinda new at this point, are completely self-inflicted, like knowing I can tank a hit or 2 and just not having the patience to wait for the boss to finish like we're in Fake Taxi or interviewing on the casting couch. Alright, I have needs too. It's really irritating to wait as long as 12 seconds for an enemy to stop attacking when my window for response is less than 1/12 of that. Like, imagine you're being interviewed, but you're immediately interrupted with the very next question every time you go to speak. You get these insanely elaborate questions and are expected to give no more than one-word responses, and it's on you to make sure those one-word responses stack up into a cohesive interview. That is Elden Ring's combat, or at least that's how it feels most of the time. I understand that there is an argument to be made for hit trading as a valid strategy, but it doesn't feel nearly as satisfying when the reward is just
good. I mean, like, that's like this is just the arrogance thing. It's so fucking, it's so gross. Like, everybody has the ego, and it's just like, so they assume like the developers are trying to tell you to hit trade because it's harder to dodge now. It's like, no, you can still play no hit if you really want to. It's just gonna take more time.
Beating the boss in a very average span of time. How long a boss fight should or shouldn't go is obviously subjective and dependent on the game in question. However, I don't think it's unfair of me to say when so much of a fight in an already meticulous...
It's like they shift what they're even talking about sentence to sentence, because is the problem that like you have to hit trade, or is the problem that it's taking too long? Because like hit trading would make it take way less time. if you weren't doing that to begin with. Like, I don't know.
Ridiculous RPG with notable gaps in activity is just pressing circle and watching a giant malformed man do cartwheels, or an enormous dog clad in heavy armor.
Because those are two separate problems, and I wish that you would not list them in the same fucking, like, thing. Devote separate parts of the video to them if you're going to talk about them.
Fly through the sky with the faint sound of Sortric sword echoing in the approaching storm. It can get pretty tiring
also,
after
like,
boss.
Have multiple. Oh my god, I'm barely letting him finish a sentence. But you're gonna have like multiple like half-hour long portions of this, and you're like less than 15 minutes to the difficulty.
Number 151. Okay, it just comes off as really try-hard when the developers try to give so many enemies such ridiculously long chains of attacks. Like, do the Banished Knights really need to be this aggressive?
Hard. I never understood the term tryhard as an insult. You guys, you put in a lot of effort, loser. Like, oh, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I was a nerd in high school and people called me that, expecting me to take it, like, personally, but...
I doubt it. I know I'm highlighting bosses mostly, but this isn't exclusive to them, not by a long shot. It'd be one thing if the...
Agreed, also it's a Souls game, shit's hard. Well, they're saying the developers are tryhards, which is, like, baffling to me, because wouldn't you want them to be? If you like their games? Welcome to the chat, by the way, AFK Snacks.
These combos were extremely sparse and reserved for bosses like Maleenia and Horaloo, but can somebody please explain why Margit is able to do as many as 15 hit combos? Bloodborne and Sekiro had their share of lengthy combos, but the Hunter and Sekiro were designed to be able to cleverly and effectively...
I prefer them to be like, yeah, wouldn't it be better if they put in just like the bare minimum effort? Wouldn't it be better if FromSoft was like every fucking other development studio?
Manage that degree of offense. Fuck. The Hunter was much faster than the Ashen One or the Tarnished, and Sekiro's kit was built around...
No, effort can only be ironic, otherwise you're cringe. True, yeah, I forgot. We're in the Marvel movie universe nowadays. That's why they added summons and shit, also busted builds you can make. Yeah, no, there's a bigger... And I've said this a fucking billion times, but there's more options than ever in Elden Ring, specifically because there's more challenge than ever. But if you want a really stripped down kit, you're going to have to invest more effort, and some people just can't fucking handle that.
Blocking and deflecting enemy attacks so as to exploit the openings and break enemy posture. Dark Souls was never equipped to handle enemies of the caliber present in Bloodborne and Sekiro, and yet despite Elden Ring's player character being identical to the one in Dark Souls 3, many of the enemies behave just as aggressively, if not more so, than the Orphan of Kaz or Geneshiro and Ishin.
Identical to DS3.
The aggression of Elden Ring's enemies is an issue that's led many to believe that...
No, they would have to look into anything to do that, you know?
That these kinds of enemies were basically designed...
Democracy can't even read. That's like a pretty unfair standard you're setting for these people, actually, Radius. You're being ableist right now.
And with Spirit Ashes in mind, with the instances that Spirit Ashes aren't accessible, serving as spikes in difficulty, which in turn further highlighted their viability outside of those scenarios.
Wait, what? I wasn't listening again. I was so sorry, guys. This isn't even a reaction. It's literally just me fucking making fun of this guy whenever he says something I can hone in on and fucking shit on.
Dark Souls was never equipped to handle enemies of the caliber present in Bloodborne and Sekiro, and yet despite Elden Ring's player character being identical to the one in Dark Souls 3, many of the enemies behave just as aggressively, if not more so, than the Orphan of Kaz or Geneshiro and Ishin. The aggression of Elden Ring's enemies is an issue that's led many to believe that these...
That's real bad. Holy fuck.
Kinds of enemies were basically designed with Spirit...
That's just a Japanese name. That's not even a fantasy name. Like
Ashes in mind, with the instances that Spirit Ashes aren't accessible, serving as spikes in difficulty, which in turn further highlighted their...
Malenia is a Sekiro boss. Other than that, they're more... No, she's not. I don't want to argue about this, but she's fine in Elden Ring.
Side of those scenarios. After all, being able to manipulate enemy aggro is an extremely powerful tool to take advantage of.
True.
Plus the very idea of Spirit Ashes...
You can't really do that. Like, you can't manipulate enemy aggro that effectively. Like, it's kind of... It feels pretty random, but that's kind of the trade-off, is like you're dealing with a more unpredictable fight. Also, scope the abilities going Instant Faith, massive mind bar. She is fine. I just mean if you were going to call... Oh, yeah, I guess I get what you mean by that. What's going on with the footage?
Ashes wouldn't even make sense were it not for enemies being so much more aggressive on the whole. Otherwise, they just wouldn't even be able to handle that kind of system.
Gotcha.
However you look at it, the extreme levels of aggression in the enemy AI feels very tone-deaf on the part of FromSoft. Souls fans have always been selective with the mechanics they like to engage with. That's just the nature of RPGs. Earlier From games always had practical ways of accounting for these preferences. Don't feel like burdening yourself with...
So does Elden Ring. Elden Ring has more than any of the other ones.
The sturdy shield?
Oh, the build is all... maybe it's multiple playthroughs, because... I don't know, I mean, like... This guy seems to have, like, wanted to be really comprehensive, given the, like, 10-hour analysis, but, like... They literally changed the AI and gank boss fights so they both don't aggro on you at once. Well... That's cool. I didn't know. I don't play with summons, so I didn't know that.
Because now you'll be able to carry another piece of gear like a staff or a talisman. Want to use magic that's more defensive than offensive? Try out miracles. Don't feel like summoning other players?
But yeah, that's cool. Like they accounted for all these things in some ways. It's like Elden Ring has such a broad spectrum that like certain things are going to feel wrong or bad or like unsatisfying in sometimes because they can't possibly account for every single facet of every single thing. But like I don't know. I feel like they did a really, really good job even considering that. And I feel like it's more satisfying than ever, except possibly Sekiro, because I still have to go back and replay that to do it pure melee, like no bells and whistles.
Built to account for both single player and multiplayer boss fights. Well, mostly. Look, they were always trying, okay? Elden Ring doesn't really have anything to offset a refusal to use Spirit Ashes. If you don't use them, you're only putting yourself at an immediate handicap, and it definitely shows against the...
That's an insane thing to say from a person who rolls with a magic build.
More aggressive bosses like Maliketh and Maleenia, and don't even get me started on the DLC. Not using Spirit Ashes can obviously...
Oh, I would love to get you started in the DLC. I think we're going to be revisiting your content quite a bit, actually, sir.
Make for an interesting challenge. I just wish there was something else to it than the self-inflicted challenge. Just some kind of offset to be...
What does that mean? Why do people feel the need to throw these adjectives in front of the word challenge like it invalidates it? Artificial challenge. We've gone into that one before, but that is a really weird one. Imagine hating Mesmer, I just can't. Yeah,
like, okay, you're not taking advantage of this mechanic, so we're gonna throw you a bone to better optimize
like self-inflicted. I mean, I guess, yeah, you chose to play the game. Maybe you shouldn't have done that.
Experience.
Because you seem to be having a miserable time.
Weird, too, because I honestly think the boss AI is mostly fine when the player is using their Spirit Ashes, at least outside of the DLC. They regularly change their target, again outside of the DLC, making them far less easy to manipulate and thus keeping the player on their toes at all times. And yes, there are...
So there's still difficulty even when you use the Spirit... Oh my god.
There are some Spirit Ashes that are pretty overpowered, but that just kind of leads into my next point. Elden Ring, much like Dark Souls,
this guy is in the democracy category.
Nowhere near
as
hard as people make it out to be. It definitely tries to live up to the studio's reputation of being the ones that make the super duper hard games, but this is completely undermined by just how many overpowered builds and tools exist in this game. Even after them...
He's wrong, the boss AI is better in the DLC for summons. Yeah, it is. It seems like they paid specific attention to making that better in the DLC, from what I've heard. In the limited experience I have doing some summoning, or being summoned, really.
Many nerfs and balance patches that dropped in Elden Ring's first few months following launch, and most recently the patches that have followed the release of the DLC, there is still an absolute abundance of overpowered weapons, spells, Ashes of War, builds.
Because there's... How do you say that, like, right after you get done with saying there's nothing outside of... Or there's nothing to offset the difficulty if you neglect Spirit Ashes? That's like the whole point of having overpowered shit in the first place.
Summons and so on. As an aside, it's also very telling that of Elden Ring's many overtuned enemies and bosses, the only notable nerf that came out was for Radagon, because that's the one that people were collectively complaining about. I don't pretend that I remember the specifics of the nerfs, but I do remember my own experience with Radagon, and I have the footage right here for a review, so what I can say is that I actually didn't have that much trouble with them. Huh.
Wow.
I guess difficulty really is subjective. Huh.
I'm going to... Okay.
Back on topic though, even with weapons like the Sword of Night and Flame, Rivers of Blood, or the Moonveil Katana getting the nerfs they did, Elden Ring is still ripe with overpowered shit to exploit. Rivers of Blood is still top tier, and not to mention very easy to acquire. Malekith's Black Blade is hilariously overpowered.
Frost and Bleed experiments with a lot of different builds, which is good for him. I don't know how he still didn't fucking end up liking it at the end of the day.
Builds are still complete and total boss breakers.
Reduvia again, good. That's kind of the point. How do you not understand this?
Is extremely powerful even in the late game, and you can find it in Limgrave. Comet Azur can still be used to melt a boss's health bar.
It's almost like the easy mode that people have begged for, who can't actually fucking finish these games but still appreciate the art direction and story. Wow, they finally did it. But it was so subtle that you retards don't fucking understand it. You think it's a problem.
Moment you walk through the fog gate, even basic Unga Bunga strength builds that dual wield
How dare they expand their audience this broadly? They should have... Okay.
Axes can completely flatten most bosses in a handful of seconds by just spamming jump attacks. This is legitimately a high-tier strategy. Whether you're looking to invest in strength, dex, intelligence, faith, or the arcane, there is plenty of OP bullshit for you to find for quite literally any and all possible builds. And don't even get me started on the mimic tier. I love using this thing as much as the next guy, but you can get away with so much if you fit it with the right weapons or spells. Here's your reminder, this thing has infinite magic. This is why I want to make it clear that many of my issues aren't solely to do with the game being quote-unquote too hard. You can cry skill issue all you want, but this isn't just to do with the game being hard, it's also to do with the game being ridiculously easy. There is a lot that goes into crafting.
Oh my god, okay.
Crafting difficulty. For every instance of Elden Ring going out of its way to bust the player's balls.
I'm gonna be the first fucking case of, like, Soulsborne discourse-induced schizophrenia. It's gonna become like a new clinical diagnosis. I'm subjecting myself to too much of this.
Either an instance of the game being
it's like fucking whiplash in my brain, like 80 times a video.
Exceptionally easy, or there being something that you can exploit to turn the game into a complete and total pushover. I'd also like to remind you once again to ignore what gatekeepers for this game have to say regarding the subject, because to them, if you take advantage of the game's more powerful assets, that makes you a scrub for opting for the easy mode because you couldn't get good. If you don't use an optimal build, it's because you're an idiot scrub that
needs discourse-induced aneurysm. My head does hurt a little bit. It's probably just because I'm hungry, though.
To get good. There is no winning with these kinds of people. If you need proof, just look at my fucking comments section. So just don't bother. The appeal of the game as an RPG is the build freedom, and that's absolutely there, so just go nuts and have fun with it. Who gives a fuck what any of these douchebags think? All of this is to say that Elden Ring's problem isn't that it's too hard or that it's too easy.
Dude, like, he's like gonna negate every single statement he's made in this video. It's gonna end up with him saying nothing. Like, this is
Elden
so
Ring's difficulty problem is far more nuanced. It's about
the difficulty problem is solved by the fact that it can be so easy. Like, these things are, how do you not connect all of this when you have like all the ingredients right there? The recipe is right in front of you and you're just not putting it together.
Balancing, and I think the scope of the game simply meant there was simply too much for this studio to account for. On a subjective level, I don't mind when a game has overpowered builds and options. You can get utterly fucking busted in games like Borderlands, but that's also half the fun. I understand Borderlands doesn't have the PvP to concern itself with, like Souls games, but Souls PvP was also
I really think they care. Man.
Mistake, and might very well be impossible to balance so long as the focus of these games is so heavily centered around the PvE. But the real issue with Elden Ring versus a game like Borderlands is that Elden Ring is going out of its way to try and craft a particularly
Wait, what did he call it, mistake? I'm sorry. The PvP? I mean...
don't mind when a game has overpowered builds and options. You can get utterly fucking busted in games like Borderlands, but that's also half the fun. I understand Borderlands doesn't have the PvP to concern itself with, like Souls games, but Souls PvP was also a mistake, and might very well...
Okay. I mean, like, there's a thriving community who really likes it, but... Sure.
It'll be impossible to balance so long.
I also would love it if they didn't have something they loved about the games.
As the focus of these games is so heavily centered around the PvE. But the real issue with Elden Ring versus a game like Borderlands is that Elden Ring is going out of its way to try and craft a particularly difficult challenge.
Okay.
And it's difficult.
But like it's up to you to determine how difficult exactly it's going to be, and it always has been. Like how much hand-holding do you want? Like, do you want to be guided through, like, if you want this exact level of challenge, make sure you level up here and here and here. At this point, this stat there, and like, what do you, like, what?
Take that challenge seriously when it can be broken.
You've never had an on-rails experience in these games, like, in terms of your build. Like, what do you want, man?
And so easily. Even Malenia, the Blade of Meequella and the Goddess of Scarlet Rot, Mrs. Hardest Ever Super Duper Boss herself, can basically be made into a complete and total joke with the right gear. I would know.
Just get good. Because it's actually not that hard. It really is just the 2 super attacks that you have to worry about.
Done it. I honestly want to know what FromSoft intends to do with their next game, and then those that come afterwards.
It's that, and as long as you know which attacks you can't poise break her, or stagger her out of, you're good.
Are they just going to keep ramping things up until their games become physically unplayable? Are we going to keep seeing these hilarious...
Did you mispronounce it? Hang on.
Joke with the right gear. A Blade of Meek try and craft a particularly difficult challenge, and it's difficult to take that challenge seriously when it can be broken so easily. Even Maleenia, the Blade of Meequella.
There's no excuse for that one. She says it every time she kills you. Meequella's name.
The Goddess of Scarlet.
She says her own name too. Fuck this guy.
This is Hardest Ever Super Duper Boss herself.
Again, like, I don't normally complain about people mispronouncing things, but this is a video essay. You wrote a script for it. They say their names in the game. You could at least fucking get it right. It just shows me that you don't actually care that much.
Can basically be made into
not enough to make a 10-hour critique, but like, I don't know, people think that like really long fucking videos inherently give you like status and prestige, apparently.
Complete and total joke with the right gear. I would know. I've done it.
That's all it is, isn't it? Right? Like, it's not that he's invested all the time. Maybe he has invested the time, but he hasn't gleaned the understanding he would need to actually put in the time to make a thoughtful, like, 10-hour critique. It's literally just like he wants it to be a big, long video because he knows people will take it more seriously if it is.
Honestly want to know what FromSoft intends to do with their next game, and then those that come afterwards. Are they just going to keep ramping things up until their games become physically unplayable? Are we going to keep seeing these hilariously broken...
No, they're not. That's the thing. You should have more trust in them than that.
Strategies and...
They literally nerfed the cross-slash for exactly that reason.
Builds that turn the capstone challenges into meme material? At what point do they start to reflect on their work and say, okay, maybe we can cool our jets here just a little bit?
That might have even happened when they were making Shadow of the Erdtree. Considering just how fucking jacked every fucking boss's pace is. That probably happens every development cycle. Like, they realize, oh, this attack is a little bit too fast to be fair, and they have to tweak it. Like, it's just the normal process of them doing things. I really don't think they've exceeded the human capability or like the boundaries of the game systems or whatever else people want to say about it. It's just fucking ridiculous.
This whole culture that they've cultivated for making hard games just for the sake of making hard games is becoming more of a headache than it's worth.
Is that what
I love challenging games.
Hard games just for the sake of hard games. Like, the whole quote from Miyazaki is that it's not just for the sake of hard games. And I want to say again, it is kind of difficulty for difficulty's sake, but I don't think that's a problem. I think that's actually what we all like about it, is that like they pay attention to making it hard on purpose. Like, if they didn't do that, nobody would appreciate these games as much.
There's a reason I fell so in love with games like Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and so on.
But everybody who's making videos about the DLC seems to want to get them to stop and like regress to an earlier point of difficulty. Like, we found the balance somewhere along the way, but we really didn't. I feel like Elden Ring is like the crown jewel of that balance in this type of game, because Sekiro is a bit different. Obviously.
All we're getting moving forward is retreads of past games, but harder. I'll just stick to watching the Vati lore videos and checking out the OST.
Good for you. Sounds like a plan. Stay out. Stay out of anything else.
By the way, I just gotta ask, Why do people always dunk on sorcery as if it's the most OP shit when faith builds are the actual Giga Chads of these?
Because we don't just draw a distinction between the two types of magic. That's the real reason. Okay, let's do another short one, because I do want to kind of take an actual break soon and have something to eat. And fight Ornstein and Smo. Fuck, I still haven't even... Oh, the bad bosses. I mean, this is probably a good
Sadly,
pick anyway,
we have
right?
reached the point to discuss the bosses I found far less favorable.
Okay. Let's just kind of skip around. Wait, Margit is bad? Oh, come on, bro.
But for now, let's talk about the Fell Omen.
In search of the Elden Ring.
Again, this is a first for me. I haven't, even people who dislike a lot of the boss design in Elden Ring, I've never seen anybody shit on Margit.
Emboldened by the flame of ambition.
Are you really just gonna play the... Dude, why are you doing this? This is like the kind of thing you do for your good boss video, but you just straight up play the intro cutscene for him?
Playthroughs, I've really only grown more as time has gone on, and because he did time mulling over.
No wonder you... Never mind. Nope. Okay.
Margit the Fell Omen is a boss that I spent a lot of time mulling over, and initially I thought he was quite alright, albeit more so because he didn't seem as bad as so many other bosses. However, as time has gone on and I fought him across more and more playthroughs, I've really only grown more and more sour towards him.
Why?
Structurally, I think the
Alright, we
placement
gotta,
of Margit is notably strong.
We gotta, speed him up.
Being a sort of gatekeep for the first significant dungeon that you're almost certain to reach, and the presentation combined with the fantastic voice acting makes for one hell of an introduction to Margit. As far as boss introductions go, Margit's is easily among the strongest in the game. Unfortunately, Margit also feels like something of an exemplar to many of the problems that I find plague Elden Ring's design philosophy, specifically regarding boss fights. First of these issues is that FromSoft seems to really prefer it when the player spends more time watching the boss than actually fighting them. I don't know why it is, but Margit in particular has some rather extensive combos that string together really seamlessly, to the point that it often feels like the game is conspiring against you by ensuring he doesn't even have a window to properly punish, or at least
so like, I'm gonna try to adhere by my first general principle with this sort of thing. So the reason why it feels like this to a lot of people, like Elden Ring bosses, even back when it was just the base game, have endless combos, is because the combos in Elden Ring are very conditional. And the boss will... The boss doesn't necessarily have set combos. What they have are attacks that can chain together seamlessly, depending on where you're positioned. There's a lot of... like Margit does a lot of that in particular. So a lot of people think that like the knife swipes that he does, the fast ones, are like undodgeable or unavoidable if you're attacking. But really it's just because you're standing in the wrong spot. If you attacked him like in a different spot and you weren't in the range of the knife swipe that he does, you would be fine. That's kind of the thing with the combos. And if you play a positioning game, like if you focus more on positioning and strafing and stuff like that, you can negate a lot of combos. Either by like shutting them down so that the boss doesn't like follow them up because you're throwing off the entire condition that is based on your positioning, or you'll just avoid it by strafing. Like the combo will still happen, but you just won't get hit.
Beyond a couple of light attacks at the most, you know, if you're feeling really greedy. I've had Margit in his
if it's
second
an actual combo and it's not just attacks being chained together, like individual ones.
phase do as many as 15 consecutive attacks in a row. It wasn't a single combo, mind you, but the stringing of his combos were so fluid that he was essentially doing several combos in a single massive chain, preventing me from doing
Okay, well that means you're fucking playing wrong.
anything but backing up for what felt like a damn eternity. I am oh so sorry for my
you're
attention.
backing up. Like, stop doing that, and maybe it won't. So you're okay. Yeah, you stayed in front of him the whole time. No shit. He's gonna keep attacking you.
Deficit, but this is fucking monotonous. But even this could be salvaged if Margit's punish windows were consistent and allowed the player ample opportunity to dish out some damage or
They're
even
not
recover.
consistent because it's conditional, again.
Unfortunately, Margit has a built-in contingency to actively punish the player for presuming an opportunity to follow up with a counterattack. Many of your attempts to punish Margit will be met with the double-slash combo from his dagger, an attack that I'm sure many of you are familiar with by now. Not only does it feel cheap, but it also kind of feels dishonest, as if the game was coaxing the player into a punish they couldn't possibly have interpreted was going to happen. At least
No, it just wants you to be more careful about the punish. Like, you have to be a little bit more thoughtful with certain punish windows against bosses. That's all.
in your first few attempts. Further compounding this is the fact that sometimes he won't even use this contingency. So why is it a bad thing?
It's conditional.
That he won't always do the thing that I just said was complete crap. Well, it's because there's almost no way of actually knowing what is or isn't an actual opportunity for attacking him without resorting to Google.
Like, these people want to make these in-depth critiques. They have no deeper understanding of how the game systems even work. Like, it's a very basic thing to understand that Elden Ring has conditional boss attack responses. Like, that's something you kind of intuitively pick up on. They all do, actually. Like, I was fighting the stray demon and like baiting certain attacks out of him because that's one way that you can that's like one aspect of higher level play in these games. It's just that Elden Ring, like, every attack is basically like that.
Google for an answer. And hey, to their credit, there are plenty of
they come out so fast that it gives the illusion of like endless combos if you're standing in the wrong spot all the time.
Content creators out there who can explain all the ins and outs of every single attack and every single boss's arsenal.
Shouldn't you be one of them if you're making an in-depth critique?
If only the game itself put in the effort to convey these mechanics in the first place. Regardless, this built-in defense mechanism feels really inconsistent, and it only serves to frustrate the player and further throw them off their first few times fighting the boss, which itself is a very common tactic for Elden Ring bosses. But it doesn't stop there. Oh no, we are just getting started. Margit also has a second built-in defense mechanism that prevents him from falling off the cliff he has fought along, despite the fact that the player can fall.
Yeah, wouldn't it be so great if you could just knock Margit off the cliff? Wouldn't that make it the iconic fucking nature of his encounter so much better?
Fall and die from it themselves. There are multiple issues with
fuck you, don't be retarded.
This alone. First of all, it establishes a very clear bias in favor of the boss. That can be fine in some cases, such as Loretta being on horseback in areas that you can't use torrent, being a strong example of boss bias being acceptable, because in that case it creates an interesting dynamic between the player and the boss that is essentially served as a flipping of the script. There's a clear and understandable purpose behind that design choice. Here, however, it's nothing more than an artificial block installed to make sure the player can't quote-unquote cheese Margit, even though doing this would require extremely precise play, and the outcome would have served.
It really wouldn't. He stands next to the edge like all the time because like one of the best ways to fight him is getting behind him, and he doesn't want you to do that so easily. So there's like it would actually be really easy to knock him off. You could just poise break him when he's on the edge, and he takes like very few hits to poise break. Again, no understanding, but he fucking 10-hour
serve is a very satisfying reward for such play. Look, it's one thing that he can't just hurl himself off the cliff during his flips. I actually think that's quite fine given his mobility, but when I manage to land a critical hit that sees my character hurling Margit towards the edge of the cliff, at the edge of the cliff, I kind of expect him to do just that. Timing your critical hits
wouldn't it be great if Margit died with 80% of his health left and you didn't even get to see phase 2?
Such a specific part of the arena that is itself
wouldn't it be great if if Margit played like the fucking tourist demon?
Risk exclusively for you is a tough enough challenge on its own, and is asking quite a bit of the player trying to utilize such a strategy. It's extremely high risk, but the reward is similarly high. Either you fall down to your death, or you send Margit barreling into his own. This would appear to be a rather straightforward issue. However, FromSoft appears to have been blinded by their desire to actively stack the cards against the player at all costs, and simply refuse to compromise even in this very understandable regard. And as if all of that weren't enough already, Margit has a third built-in...
it wouldn't be like something like rare like the Demon of Hatred falling off. This would happen to so many people because his arena is designed in such a way that it makes it easy for you to fall off. Like, that's kind of one of the balancing acts the fight is doing, is that like you have to, if you want to fight him optimally in melee, you kind of want to get behind him, but you don't want to spend too much time behind him because he'll dash away and you can also fall off that way. So it's like, whatever. That's one of the ways you can do it. There's also ways you could just stand kind of diagonally in front of him and like trigger favorable combos. It's actually more reliable than getting behind him. I'm just not as good at that because he won't dash away at all if you do it that way. But yeah, point being, like, he would fall off for like 50% of people probably because the arena is fucking like ridiculous.
Contingency to automatically punish the player for attempting to heal once they've identified a gap in his offense, which feels like a needless punishment for what should be correct identification of enemy behavior. Instead, what you're rewarded with is the enemy being granted selective input reading so as to immediately identify and take advantage of a punish window that shouldn't even exist to begin with. Not only does Margit throw out 2 rather fast projectiles, but he can immediately begin to initiate another combo the moment he's finished throwing them. What's even more ridiculous is just how obvious it is. Players identify
also,
this.
Sometimes he does the backwards hop when he's against the edge, so he could, like, at the very beginning of the fight, theoretically just hop off the edge and you never get to fight him.
Immediately.
I think it's a good thing, actually, that they don't let him fall off.
A rather heated debate within the community. What I find even more interesting, though, is just how faulty this contingency actually is. Depending on how far you are, you'll actually be able to avoid the first projectile, then dodge the second. But given the odds of being at the appropriate range, it feels like more of a failure in the design to account for the full scale of the arena, rather than a proper opening in Margit's offense. I just don't understand why they thought it prudent to give...
I know I'm being nitpicky, but, like, it's just like, these people don't think about the things that they say. Like... Yeah,
boss.
Whatever.
So many built-in counters to basic strategies players should be rewarded for intuiting on their own, but it's pretty frustrating to say the least. Oh, and let's not forget that Margit reappears as a non-boss outside Lindell. I guess Morgott decided now was the time for a rematch and possessed this random bystander? I don't know. Look, let's call it what it is. It's literally just Margit reappearing as a field enemy. Also, my god, this arena is downright infuriating to try and fight in because of all those stupid holes in the ground. And let's be clear, this isn't just because it makes things harder for the player. More often than not, Margit will get stuck in one of the craters and the AI just has no grasp of how to handle it. I still can't really decide if I think this is hilarious or just sad. There's also the issue of his delayed attacks, which to this day are a constant nuisance to deal with for many first-time players. Like I said, Elden Ring has a very clear goal of stacking the cards against the player in ways that feel very artificial and cheap. And it would seem one of the techniques FromSoft opted for was by incorporating awkward delays in enemy attacks so as to punish the player for dodging when they would naturally intuit the boss would be most likely to attack.
So delayed attacks serve many purposes. One of them is to make it more unintuitive and make it harder on you. That's a good thing because they keep escalating the difficulty because players keep getting better. If you're not getting better, there are many ways to circumvent the difficulty. That's what you should be doing if you're still having a hard time and you're this upset about it. But in addition to that, delayed attacks also serve the purpose of letting you consistently recover your stamina so that you never really have to worry about it that much unless you are really spending a lot of it or doing something wrong.
Not only do these excessively long windups look silly, but they constantly make you second-guess your movements as you're trying to learn the fight. This ultimately funnels players into focusing more on memorizing the exact points between animations where they'll be permitted a successful dodge. Not only is this unnatural...
Like Dark Souls. Okay, let's go to another boss. MOHG. MOHG is... Are you fucking...
It's been 2 years
really?
Since that disaster struck. The city's population is now sparse. In an effort to escape
MOHG?
the monsters, you found a...
MOHG. Really? Wow. MOHG is like the best boss in the base game, but okay. This is gonna be interesting. Why are you doing this for every... You're gonna just put the full intro cutscene in there for all the bosses you think are bad. He thinks that being able to dodge the throwing knives when you're farther away from Margit is a design oversight? Wait, but like you could do that with any kind of projectile since Dark Souls. Like, he's literally the meme of "this fucking sucks" actually, and the other thing just saying literally coolest thing ever. Yeah. Yep.
Another boss I find similarly irritating to fight is none other than MOHG. Yet another of the Omenkin, but don't worry, this one is definitely not Margit. Probably. For the sake of simplifying things, I'm mostly going to be talking about the Lord of Blood fight. However, I may use footage from the Omen fight or make a reference to it from time to time, but I'll be sure to make it clear when I'm talking about that versus the Lord of Blood. Starting out, we have a trait very familiar to his kind. That's not a race thing, mind you. I just consider them very loud and obnoxious. In all seriousness, I will say that I don't think MOHG's moveset is nearly as excessive or insufferable as Morgott's, but that's hardly saying much given just how high Morgott sets that bar. MOHG's problem is more to do with the sheer...
He means like omens, right?
Consider them very loud and obnoxious versus the Lord. However, I may use footage from the Omen fight or make a reference to it from time to time, but I'll be sure to make it clear when I'm talking about that versus the Lord of Blood. Starting out, we have a trait very familiar to his kind. That's not a race thing, mind you. I just consider them very loud and obnoxious. In all seriousness, I will say that I don't think MOHG's moveset is nearly as excessive or insufferable as Morgott's, but that's hardly saying much given just how high Morgott sets that bar. MOHG's problem is more to do with the sheer coverage of his weapon and the fact that it leaves trails of damaging flames during his second phase, which can get pretty out of hand to put it mildly. The Omen fight lacks...
Okay. No,
flame trails, but his staff still covers a significant portion of the pretty cramped arena with each swing. He also has a handful of very awkwardly long windups because apparently that's all his people can do. No, but seriously, I was so fed up with this by the time I reached MOHG the Omen that it honestly felt like...
What is this? I'm laughing because it's so awkward.
FromSoft was just trolling me at that point. I will say that I don't think the delays themselves even come close to the levels of obnoxious that Margit and Morgott were hitting, but combine these awkward delays with his exceptional reach...
I know omens aren't real. Like, obviously he's not racist for this, but like...
Not to mention the area coverage. And yeah, there are times where I wanted to light my eyes on fire. I don't find him nearly as frustrating now that I've gotten so much better at the game. However, that concession is twofold because he's also one of the bosses that's seen the sharpest decline in difficulty for me personally. I've now killed him before he could even enter his second phase multiple times now, and I honestly find it more strange than anything. I mean,
So like you got good... and you killed the fight faster, and that's bad.
Have improved at the game, yeah, sure, but I also have a lot of people...
Also, like, your build is fucking stacked. Don't you have, like,
my comments telling me to get good, so, hey, what do I know? MOHG also has
like, you're not putting in any effort to kill him more slowly. Why would you... This is
ability to use pyromancy, which causes bleed, because I guess his fire flays flesh instead of burning it. Something, cursed outer god magic. Who cares? It's cool.
Maybe I'm doing something bad by giving this guy attention. Like, these are so fucking bad, like, all of his takes, that it just gives me the impression that he actually is a grifter, this guy.
Facetious, but in all seriousness, I actually really don't mind his pyromancy. The floor becoming lava in the Lord of Blood fight is a bit excessive. It doesn't really feel as organic as the Magma Worm fight, for instance. But his actual pyromancy attacks are mostly fine to deal with solid enough damage and
So you don't know the lore.
and not to mention feeling very survivable provided you have a solid grasp of what you're dealing with. Though I will say I was less than a fan of his forward swipe, you know, the one that causes an explosion. This attack is weird.
Right,
sometimes
you don't know how it works.
It comes out really fast and tracks really hard, but there are also times where he seems to drag out the windup.
Those were the same. Are you fucking kidding me?
With solid enough damage and telegraphing, and not to mention feeling very survivable provided you have a solid grasp of what you're dealing with. Though I will say I
Do I need to get out a stopwatch, fucking Joseph Anderson style? Am I crazy? There was no difference between those two things, right?
Less than a fan of his
I'm going with the stopwatch. Let's just look at it again. You literally strafe right. Yeah, that's like the
forward swipe. You know, the one that causes an explosion. This attack is weird. Sometimes it comes out really fast.
Yeah, that's like the first one that I figured out when I revisited MOHG with positioning in mind.
Fast and tracks really hard, but there are also times where he seems to drag.
Yeah, no, they were the same.
Dealing with. Though I will say I was less than a fan of his forward swipe. You know, the one that causes an explosion.
I'm gonna count. I can't get
but his actual pyromancy attacks are mostly fine to deal with solid enough damage and telegraphing, and not to mention feeling very survivable provided you have a solid grasp of what you're dealing with. Though I will say I was less than a fan of his forward swipe, you know, the one that causes an explosion.
Okay.
This attack is weird. Sometimes it comes out really fast and tracks really hard.
It's exactly the same.
But there are also times where he seems to drag out the windup and track less. I guess this is something he can just do.
They're all the same.
Like, this can't just be me,
They're
right?
all exactly
I understand that this move exists.
What are you talking about?
As a punish for over-aggression at a frontal position from the player, but I'd have appreciated a little bit of restraint on the tracking at the least. Again, when the tracking is
okay.
high, it's usually in conjunction with him launching this attack really fast. Seems kind of counter.
Yeah, if there are any differences, it's because you are doing different things in response to them, and again, it's conditional.
Intuitive, but again, what do I know? What I can say, though, is that high tracking in conjunction with such a distinctly fast windup makes dodging it way more of a pain than it really should be. The margin for error just feels off. It's far from the most egregious attack in the game. Like, I'm not saying this fight is ruined because of this one attack or anything, but it does feel kinda off. MOHG also possesses two rather unique mechanics, one of which I actually am quite fond of, that being MOHG Shackle. In a way, this feels like Elden Ring's answer.
What the fuck? Feeble King moment. Alright, so this one is weird. I don't have any footage of using... Okay, I don't care.
To the music box for Father Gascoigne and Bloodborne. However, it's been nerfed in ways that I feel...
How did I just do that? Okay. Alright, okay.
Appropriate. For starters, it can only be used during his first phase. Narratively, I'm not really sure why, but mechanically...
At least he leaves it on screen for, like, long enough to actually read it. Hotkey on accident? I didn't know I had one, though. I don't remember setting up hotkeys for this.
This is fair because it essentially acts as a fast track to his harder phase whilst preventing the player from trivializing that part of the fight. Father Gascoigne's second phase wasn't too difficult to render a non-threat, at least for a significant window with the music box, so it feels like they took a very reasonable balancing act towards preventing the player from blitzing MOHG's most powerful form. The shackle can also only be acquired from a rather specific quest, so as useful as it can be, it's also quite easy to miss as well. It's by no means a requirement for the fight, so it's fine that this would be pretty obscure. Unfortunately, I do not find the Blood Boon spell that MOHG uses when going into his second phase to be nearly as tolerable. This attack is honestly bullshit. The spell automatically sticks to the player. There is literally nothing they can do to block or even avoid its effects without having a very specific
it's a way to limit the amount of flasks you have access to if you don't have the tier.
Mixed into their wondrous physic that they need to drink when the fight starts in order to protect themselves.
Rev up those fires because this footage is fucked.
This is the only time in the game that this tier will see any use. This is its one and only purpose, to avoid taking massive damage from a completely unavoidable attack.
The Draconic Tree Sentinel. Let's look at this one.
The Draconic Tree Sentinel is one of those bosses that I audibly groan at the sight of. Not only do its multiple...
it's a reskin or some shit?
Placements seem to be...
Oh my god.
Intentionally obnoxious, but his second phase is one of the absolute worst and laziest
in
the game, as far as I'm concerned.
Some people might even call him one of the best bosses in the base game, but you know, most people might even call him that. But
Tree Sentinel
not this person.
Known is more or less already a reskin of the Tree Sentinel, albeit with extreme stat buffs and a slightly altered moveset, and not to mention a horse that can now spit fire. Okay. Oh, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that the Spitfire also comes fully equipped with input reading, because of course it does.
He did beat the allegations too. We're all very proud of him.
As we really need to punish the player for finding an opportunity to heal. Oh my god.
Oh, there it is.
Draconic Tree Sentinel.
Woo! We found it. There's one of the other
Phase 2
ones.
also grants it a bunch
I gotta actually make a bingo card for this shit.
Of OP magic, including a lightning bolt that hard tracks the player and can only be defended against by dodging. There's also...
I want to see the fire giant. Oh, you know what? That is a good suggestion, because yes, it should be very easy to point out what's wrong with the fire giant.
Then we have the
you
fire...
don't need to be above room temp IQ to do that.
Giant, a boss that I honestly consider pretty irredeemable in every regard, at least outside of that Phase 2 cutscene. It really is just the embodiment of everything wrong with Elden Ring's late game. He has a ridiculously bloated health bar, deals insanely high damage, is extremely difficult to dodge thanks mostly to the camera, blocking his attacks is basically a non-option, and perhaps worst of all, he has a ton of methods for stalling this fight. This is the worst kind of enemy to fight against because naturally, the longer the fight
I don't really mind him stalling the fight. It's just like the fight that he's stalling is bad. That's more the issue.
The more susceptible you are to making some kind of mistake, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, like I mean, all the bosses have like some methods of stalling the fight. It doesn't really bother me.
Worse on successive attempts, given how much more frustrated and discouraged you're likely to grow from having repeated such a long and punishing battle. Obviously, not everyone will feel the exact same way, but you can see very clearly why anyone would utterly dread having to fight this boss.
Yeah,
it isn't just monotonous; it is downright painstaking. There's also the issue of tracking, which I've touched on here and there, but
he's gonna mention the arena at all.
But oh my god, is it noticeable with the fire giant. You would think that such a massive enemy wouldn't even need to track the player as hard as this thing manages to, but as previously stated, FromSoft designed this game with the philosophy...
I wouldn't have even had a way to notice the tracking, to be honest with you. I don't know if that's a problem or not. I guess it could be.
...of trying to kill the player at all costs, including
I guess maybe the fireballs, but like you just learn the dodge timing for them and you're good.
Visual integrity. See, that's the thing. The cost here isn't just limited to being a rather frustrating detail in a fight. It also just looks really fucking stupid. Like, I would honestly compare it with the Duke's Dear Freyja. It is that bad. You feel handicapped in almost every way when fighting this boss, and at this point in the game, it's become so cartoonishly skewed that it's just comical. The fire giant, as you may suspect, is way larger than you, making it difficult to dodge his attacks as is, but then it becomes even harder because the camera is so bad at keeping track of what the heck he's even doing. Then when you finally do get hit, you'll either find yourself being one-shot or brought dangerously close to it, forcing you to use as many as 2 fully upgraded heals just so you can survive a single other attack. This is not an even remotely fair fight, and the fact that it can go on for so long makes it extremely frustrating to die.
As opposed to every other fight in Elden Ring, which is of course fair. We must always remember this.
I do. Now look, the thing to understand about dying in video games is that any amount of it is always going to be frustrating to any number.
I don't want to use the words fair or unfair so like confidently anymore to describe these things, because it's like does so much of the lifting for these people and they never are able to justify it.
Of people. But again, this fight practically seems handcrafted to induce major frustration for even bothering to participate in it. And we haven't even gotten to the second phase. Spoiler alert, it's dreadful. Not gonna lie though, like I said, the transition cutscene is pretty damn cool.
Hooray. Yeah, if you didn't have the cutscenes in here, this video would be so much shorter. Starting to see where the 10-hour length comes from in the overall thing.
After Morgott, and the fire giant is honestly the perfect encapsulation of everything that is wrong with it, and not to mention why areas like the mountaintops of giants and the consecrated snowfield are so regularly maligned, even by many of this game's hardcore fans.
What does the fire giant have to do with the area itself?
Areas are downright infuriating to suffer through, and capping off the mountaintops with a mandatory story boss with health and damage that are...
I think the area of the mountaintops of the giants is like particularly frustrating. The thing that I hear everybody say about it is they don't like the enemy reuse.
This needlessly bloated, alongside a myriad of other potentially frustrating details like the sheer size of its hitboxes and the camera.
Again, the fire giant has nothing to do with it.
For being more of a detriment than it is helpful, especially when locked on. And I hope that I've painted a pretty clear picture as to why I find the fire giant in particular to be such an abysmal train wreck of a boss.
I mean, sure,
so hey,
yeah. You didn't mention the boss arena. That's like one of the big things, and everybody talks about that when they talk about why the fire giant sucks. Whatever. I guess that wasn't terrible, but it's the fire giant. Again, it's actually a layup. I don't know. Rykard. Fuck it. I'm skipping to him talking because.
The God-devouring serpent, aka Rykard the Blasphemous King, is a boss that I actually found myself quite fond of initially. I've always found it interesting to see FromSoft trying once every few games to take the Storm King boss concept in new directions, and the presentation of this fight is easily among some of the most impressive in this game. In fact, for what it's worth, and to the credit of the artistic direction, it might be the most visually incredible boss in this entire game. However, as I fought Rykard more and more, I found the fight to be overall pretty sloppy, if not a bit too simple for its own good. That may sound kind of simple, but there's actually a lot of complicated details that make this the case. Rykard's boss can essentially be boiled down to using the Serpent Hunter's Spear to devastate him with massive attacks, which are exclusive to that particular boss fight. This isn't too far off from what Yorm and the Storm King did. However, with Rykard, there are some differences, some good and some bad, that distinguish this fight. The first and most apparent is perhaps the boss itself. I'm kind of curious if this is going to be a divisive take, but Rykard is far more difficult than the Storm King and even Yorm, having a pretty fleshed out moveset as well as a whole second phase where he gains even more attacks, and not to mention a second health bar. Now, none of
you can kill Yorm in 5 hits.
This alone is a bad thing. I actually really appreciate how much more involved and realized this boss fight feels by comparison to previous iterations of this gimmick. And it also helps that the Serpent Hunter's Spear has a far more engaging moveset than the Storm Ruler in Dark Souls 3 and obviously Demon Souls, both of which had you pretty much doing the same attack over and over until the health bar disappeared. Yes. Now, make no mistake, those fights are great.
Sure. for Demon's Souls. Spoiler.
Undeniably standout moments for both of those games, but I doubt anyone would deny they felt very simple and perhaps a bit too repetitive, especially on New Game
It's
Plus.
the same move as Yorm too. Huh.
This would inherently make Rykard seem like the obvious best of these types of fights thus far, being a far more
it would.
realized boss with more to account for in regards to both his and the player's moveset. However, I find the boss itself to be designed in a way that doesn't really seem to understand the player's skill set, and there's a few reasons for this. For starters, breaking Rykard's stance doesn't open him up for a critical hit, and the window of vulnerability feels so slim that
What? He's lying in the middle of a pool of lava.
It hardly even feels like a reward at all. Second, many of Rykard's attacks have such massive hitboxes and deal so much damage that dodging sometimes feels borderline impossible, and blocking will just leave you vulnerable.
I dislike that attack. I feel like it might have a bad hitbox. I don't really know.
To a
but I feel like that's the only one, as far as I remember.
Now, Rykard is fairly easy to stagger, so you might think it best to play extremely aggressively, but again, the reward for doing so is distractingly lacking given just how quickly he'll get right back up. Furthermore,
I feel like if you could critical attack him, he would be, like, even easier, and he's already pretty easy.
Rykard has 2 rather sizable health bars, meaning that you will be at this boss for a noticeable length of time from start to finish.
Yeah, I don't know. He said that several of his attacks have bad hitboxes or whatever the fuck he said, and then he showed that one attack that does, and then just, like, I guess left the rest up to everybody's imagination. Cool. Wow, I sure love the way that people criticize Elden Ring.
Which in turn means more opportunity will arise for the boss to deal damage as well, which, as I've mentioned, is pretty easy given...
So everybody who is of the same mindset can just slot in the few attacks that killed them that they don't understand, and you know.
Just how capable he is of tearing through any attempts to block and throwing out such massive attacks at you that you quite literally cannot hope to dodge them. Or at least that's how it can feel, primarily with this one ground attack, which I genuinely cannot get a grasp of how to dodge. And I've tried everything, jumping, dodging...
Burning toast?
I don't know how to dodge this.
Maybe a mini stroke. I think we're alright.
Attack. I think I've done it once, and that was genuinely out of luck. Wow, Loveless, that's just proof you're bad at the game. Well... Cool. What's especially strange, though, is just how little damage his lava pool does. Now, yes, it will stack up over time, but it's ironic that lava damage does so little damage because it means that the safest strategy is actually just staying as close to him as possible, as doing so will make him more likely to whiff an attack, while also doing very little to actively punish you for being so close.
Okay.
I have a really...
I mean, like, that's a very consistent theme in their games, that you actually have to approach the thing that is very scary to do well. I don't even really necessarily think that's what's going on here, because it seems that the lava would indicate that you don't want to do that, but...
Hard time understanding Rykard because of these weird little nuances. Furthermore, as much as I do enjoy his second phase aesthetically, it does have 2 major problems. The first of which being just how difficult it is to even tell just what on earth is happening. Oh dear God, what is happening? I know YouTube compression is going to make this look a bit worse than it actually...
I don't know.
To enjoy his second phase aesthetically, it does have 2 major problems. The first of which being just how difficult it is to even tell just what on earth is happening. Oh dear God, what is...
Clear. It can be an issue, but I feel like, aren't you supposed to just not let the skulls pile up on you by avoiding them?
Ring already
like it isn't a visual fuckfest.
I've
only killed Rykard once, so I don't know. I'm not super familiar with
upward telegraphs that make attacks difficult to read, and Rykard is no exception with that either. For example, he has an attack where he swings his sword diagonally, slamming it to the ground, then he proceeds to drag it. It's not the hardest attack in the world to dodge once you understand this, but it can act as a very cheap way of taking damage when the windup was so blatantly telegraphing a completely different style of attack. Furthermore, Rykard's Phase 2 is utterly flooded with visual effects that clog the screen. Like I said, the fight looks amazing, but it's also rather difficult to tell in the heat of the moment just what it is that's even going on, and that can lead to you taking what is essentially unavoidable damage, due primarily to the fact that you couldn't even process what was happening. I swear to God, if I had played Elden Ring before I'd started wearing glasses, holy Jesus Christ, this fight would have been practically...
Yeah, but that would have been your fault.
Explode on contact.
Okay, What bosses does he like? The worst? Oh my God, there's gonna be a bunch of good ones on this list too, aren't there? Is this the one Radagon's on? Maliketh? Maleenia, of course. There it is. There's the infamous section. The one I wish I could... Are you kidding me? I was about to say I'm going to take a break and then we'll explore this video, but I have to know.
Queen of the Full Moon.
Are you being serious? Why, though? What are the reasons?
Hello? Oh God, it can't be. The Prowling Magus from Dark Souls 2. No. All these Catholic schoolboys are gonna want my ass kicked.
This is a psyop.
That's cool, boss. Design.
Yeah, these videos were made to make me kill myself. This is the true purpose of this person's channel.
I don't despise Rennala, but I also can't help but blame her for being
isn't
catalyst for all my negativity that I feel towards Elden Ring. It could have been any number of other bosses depending on whereabouts I happened to venture in my first playthrough, but ultimately it was Rennala that would come to define this game for myself personally, more so than Maleenia, the Elden Beast, Placidus Axe, or even Godfrey. I fully intend to objectively judge this boss on its own merits, but I feel it's important for this boss especially to convey my subjective experience and the context for why I feel the way I do about it. She's far from the objectively worst boss in the game, but my experience with her is very much going to stay with me for however long it is that this game is on my mind. Prior to Elden Ring's release, I was pretty excited for it. I wasn't going crazy, but I was looking forward to it from the moment that it was announced. As the launch drew nearer, I was pretty excited, especially with how well it was reviewing and the general
at the end of your worst bosses video
surrounding the community. I'd also not seen anything beyond the initial reveal trailer, so I was going in blind and with no expectations other than to find myself immersed in another fascinating world with lore to uncover, and of course exciting challenges to overcome. My opening hours with Elden Ring were kinda strange to say the least. I was getting very mixed signals with the game as far as its quality, with some aspects of the game.
Are you just hoping that people are gonna click off before you admit your shame about Rennala? Like, why are you telling this story? I don't
really
care.
Impressing me, like the character creation.
Just get to the cringe.
The game's turn from a fun new Souls successor into a game that I had honestly a terrible first experience with.
So Rennala is what ruined the game for you on your first playthrough.
It's important to understand that I was really
you hated Margit too.
Excited to see Rennala's boss fight, and for what it's worth, I think the surrounding area of Liurnia does a fantastic job of building up the lore of Raya Lucaria, as well as Rennala and even Radagon's characters.
Cool.
I wasn't sure what to expect, knowing that Radagon had abandoned her, but it was obvious that I was going to be dealing with a very heartbroken character that also just so happened to be the most powerful sorceress in the lands between. Sorcerer bosses are also surprisingly scarce in From games, and they're typically not that impressive either, so I was really pulling for one that would break the mold and show me what this game was truly capable of as far as bosses and general creativity. And eventually I would come face to face with Rennala. I found Rennala's first phase pretty interesting, at least with my initial encounter. It was more or less an expansion on Pinwheel and even the Deacons of the Deep concept, which requires you to find 3 targets in a room of many and kill them so as to make Rennala vulnerable. As much time as you're allotted between Rennala's offense, she can actually deal some fairly high damage relative to that point in the game, so you need to use your time wisely. I had also deduced very quickly that there was no way this was going to be all there was to the fight, and I immediately recognized how tedious the first phase was going to be on replay, were it to be a mandatory part of the fight every time. There's also very little in the ways of creative potential or freedom to the fight. It's a very rinse-repeat process that can wear
but
thin even in a single attempt, depending on how fast you're killing Rennala. Made worse by the fact that her phase 1 and 2 don't
I guess I wouldn't really know, but I'm pretty sure that's not how it works.
A health bar, meaning
I guess I can't really blame him for not knowing though, because nobody fucking does.
First phase just goes on longer than it seems to deserve, again relative to the damage output you're likely to be dealing at that point in the game. If you decide to come back a lot later, well, yeah, Phase 1's gonna fly by, but that's not the average intended experience. By the time I'd reached Phase 2, I was starting to get pretty annoyed. It wasn't difficult so much as tedious, and I was starting to feel like I was getting a pretty firm understanding of the design philosophy behind this game.
The only time that I've ever felt along similar lines to Rennala is when I was fighting her with like barely any health, and she was like one-shotting me. That's when Phase 1 starts to feel tedious, when you're like literally underpowered.
And I was really hoping that Rennala's Phase 2 would be where things took a turn for the better, and for what it's worth, that Phase 2 cutscene, man.
Oh. Okay. I'm assuming a cutscene is supposed to happen? Okay, there we go.
Oh, wow, yeah. That happens sometimes.
My beloved, have no fear. I will hold thee.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Ye will be countless born, forever and ever.
What the fuck? Is there another phase?
What? Didn't you say you knew there would be?
Upon my name is Rani the Witch.
Oh.
Like, why? Like, that was such an easy one to not contradict yourself with, man. Fuck.
Foul trespasser.
Okay.
Send word far and wide. Of the last queen of
So when he finishes this Rennala bullshit, I'm gonna take a break, and then we're gonna go back and figure out why he thinks the best fucking bosses in the game are bad, or the worst.
Yo,
actually.
that is sick! That is sick!
At least MOHG didn't end up on this list, I guess.
Man, did that get me hyped. Then her second phase began, and I was actually kind of enjoying myself. The opening Kamehameha felt a bit excessive, but I was willing to shrug it off because of just how well telegraphed it was. In fact, all of her attacks felt pretty well telegraphed. Nothing came out as really unfair or cheap. The only
Again, like, why do you like these games?
attacks that felt notably hard to dodge were the attacks with her scepter, but even they weren't that bad. She has a wide enough variety in her attacks, but she also never lacks for consistency either. I also appreciated the fact that there was a recognizable and logically coherent pattern to the behavior of her AI, and it didn't feel unnatural either. Rennala is a sorceress. She's far from the tankiest boss, and she can even
Like, what are you comparing that to? What are we...
to be staggered with heavy enough attacks. Because of this, she prioritizes widening the gap between herself and the player so as to be able to safely fire off her more powerful sorceries. She's by no means lacking in close-range offense, but it's clear that she specializes in ranged offense. There's this sort of cat-and-mouse energy to chasing her down, but she doesn't constantly widen the gap instantaneously like Gwendolyn or even the Elden Beast. If I'm being honest, Rennala's Phase 2 started out pretty strong.
Nothing felt earlier in the game, so it's more forgiving at that point.
Because of her blatant in its design.
That helps. Games have a natural progression of difficulty to them as you go through.
Her behaviors made sense, her attacks were strong but never unfair. The arena and OST are among the best in the game. I was primed to label her my favorite boss up to that point. Then I got to her Phase 2's Phase 2. This game almost had me. This boss was so close, man. Just when all seemed to be right in the
Dude, like, it's not that bad.
World, and I was beginning to truly enjoy myself. Rennala plants her scepter in the water, blowing me away and casting a summoning spell. And this right here, ladies and gentlemen, this is the exact moment, down to the frame, that Elden Ring crushed me.
Okay. That's really sad.
Devotion by Dolce & Gabbana.
Whoa! What the fuck? That's a Sekiro enemy.
I mean, so, wait, did you not? Okay.
What? What? She could just summon a second boss like that? What the fuck?
And then it goes away. You have to dodge one attack pattern. Wow, how unfair.
Oh god. A fucking what? She can summon a dragon! What the shit?
He's in the Evergale. He's never, he hasn't even seen fucking Bloodhound Knight Darrowell. Like, you didn't look at the map, see the obvious circle screaming, "Come check me out," to you on your first playthrough? Like, that. Alright, whatever. I mean, there's nothing that doesn't. Yeah, in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with that, I guess. But Sekiro enemy, yeah.
What the? She can just summon a dragon.
Fucking so
Just
easy.
like
They
that.
put it as one of the first encounters in the game you could even have.
And it deals a shit ton of damage, and appears to track me also. Thank God I had slow recovery on that. Holy shit.
This has to be bait.
I don't know
right?
what to do about this.
Like, I'm gonna watch the rest of this video probably when we.
She could just
come
summon
back,
this big
It just really does feel like I'm being set up here.
fucking boss tier enemy. Okay, wow, that's really fucking cheap. That's so cheap. That's so cheap. I can't do anything about that.
What? I wasn't paying attention. What is he? The fire breath? What?
I don't know what to do about this.
Well,
I don't know
it's
what
a
to do about
fire
this.
breath. So if you had ran in,
I got nothing. She could just
like,
summon
you know, one of the lessons you could have learned fighting fucking Calamite, I guess. But hey.
big fucking boss tier enemy. Okay, wow, that's really fucking cheap.
Or the bell gargoyles, actually.
That's so cheap.
Fuck me.
That's so cheap. I can't do anything about that.
You can't do anything. No options. Nothing you can do.
I have no way
of
of beating
course.
this boss if she can just do that.
What?
Here comes another one. Oh my god, are you serious? Fuck that. Fuck everything about that. I do not.
No wonder he did. He should have put this, like, didn't he? His bad bosses video is in order of, like, the way you encounter them. This one isn't, because he wanted to put Rennala at the end because he knew people were going to give him shit
Like,
for this.
a boss having the ability to summon a fucking
There's
boss.
no way I can beat this. Oh my god.
Fucking Ilana the Squalid Queen bullshit.
There's no way I could. Fuck. Yeah, they made it impossible by accident. Thank you, random YouTube commenter, for this treasure trove of a channel. Yes, thank you.
Oh my god. No, that. Way to ruin the fucking fight. Way to absolutely.
Oh my god, this is so much more fun than Joseph
That's
Anderson, at least.
really bullshit. That is such horseshit.
Yeah, dude.
My enjoyment has been completely just shat on.
Oh, fuck, man.
Summoning a fucking boss.
Oh
that's
no. I hope this doesn't lead to you leaving the Soulsborne community forever and never polluting it with your opinions again.
Why the fuck would you? Like summoning the one, you know, fucking Gale wannabe enemy. Like fine, whatever. It's annoying, but fine.
Dude, what are you ever talking about?
Summoning a goddamn dragon that can.
I guess it's kind of like Gale Phase 1 if you like just like strip it down to its barest elements. Yeah, sure, but yeah, okay.
One shot me, fuck you. Because like it's a fucking dragon, its attacks are gonna cover the whole goddamn arena. On top of having to deal with her million homing projectiles. Fuck that. Raya Lucaria, I don't enjoy thee at all.
Okay, it's great, but
I hate this fucking
I'm
area
sorry
so much.
that you have that problem, dude.
I legitimately fucking hate this fucking area. Oh my god. As Rennala's health hits the 50%.
It's so funny to me because like I had a similar experience trying to kill Rennala once, and it was literally my own fault because I just had too low health. Like that was all it was. That was the only thing that was contributing to my frustration.
Mark or somewhere around that range, she'll proceed to cast a summoning spell to call upon one of
my health bar was about as big as his is right now in this clip too.
the four spirits.
So just go level up, bro. That's all you gotta do.
Wolves,
So
a Bloodhound
easy.
Knight, which is basically a D-tier knockoff of
It's impossible.
Artorias and
though.
Gale, a
That's
Troll, which of course
impossible.
deals high damage and covers a decent area of effect, and an actual fucking dragon. Bear in mind, this summon cannot be broken via stagger,
dragon, aka the bosses that people are literally sick of because they fought them so much.
at least to my knowledge, and there is
I wonder why they picked that one.
quite literally no room for punish because of the knockback. Yeah, you can dodge through it, but first of all, the dodge window is extremely slim, and second of all, you now have another enemy to worry about attacking you, and they all deal pretty substantial damage. There are few things in video
He really
games
just nailed it.
because of the knockback. Yeah, you can dodge through it, but first of all, the dodge window is extremely slim, and second of all, you now have
it perfectly and like.
another enemy to worry about attacking you, and they all deal pretty substantial damage.
Look at that. There, that's what you do for the fire breath.
There are few things in video
Wow,
games anymore
so
that can
hard.
seriously, genuinely piss me off beyond a brief moment of, wow, what the fuck?
Okay. My second playthrough, Malenia used Waterfowl 4 times in a row. Sometimes the game just decides you should lose. Yeah, that's annoying. That's like the one actual complaint about Waterfowl Dance that I still think is valid.
Her summons will remain active until the cutscene is finally initiated and you're brought back to Raya Lucaria. This was such a monumental disappointment of a boss for me personally. Raya Lucaria was bad enough, but for the capstone challenge of the dungeon, to have such a monotonous first phase and a second phase that was...
I love Raya Lucaria, man. I don't know how people feel about the levels in Elden Ring generally. I haven't like looked around too much about that, but I really, really like Raya Lucaria. All right, I don't know. Let's watch a little bit, and if it's like too boring, I'll set up Dark Souls. Maliketh, I really like Maliketh. Worst bosses, let's go. The one I wish I could forget. Also didn't put Rennala's name in there. God fucking damn it, George. I know you're responsible for this, naming them Rennala and Rellana. People on Twitter tell me that fucking From Software redid the names. I don't believe them. George R. R. Martin, I know this was you.
Become my blade once more.
Right. I forgot he includes the full fucking cutscenes, even for bosses that he hates.
very
for
much
some
full of
reason.
section immediately obvious. Maliketh is a boss that I dislike for a multitude of reasons, so let's start with the most immediately obvious design choice before we get into the real meat and potatoes of this thing. That being the visual design. I know I have a whole section dedicated to the game's artistic direction, but
Do you
I can't
consider
not
Beast
talk
Clergyman to be separate?
about this. I understand this critique has been very much full of hot takes, but I want to at least acknowledge that what I'm about to say is extremely subjective, and I realize that I am in the minority on Maliketh's design. However, I still think it's worth discussing nonetheless. Maliketh's visual design makes it very difficult for me to take him remotely seriously. I'm sure I just triggered a hell of a lot of people by saying this, but give me a moment to explain. I completely understand. Sincerely,
Dude,
like anyone
Maliketh is sick as fuck. What the hell? This
would
is
like
bait.
Maliketh's visual
This is
design,
actually
but
bait,
for me,
isn't
it comes off as a very try-hard attempt to emulate the aesthetics of several beloved and, in my opinion, far superior bosses. Maliketh is
The day for night thing is distracting, but let's give him the benefit of the doubt and assume he had some setting in the capture check by accident. Didn't he do it for all of them, though?
his fan service cranked to 11. His hair is an obvious throwback to
I
Nameless
don't know
King.
if
His sword
I guess maybe he made this whole fucking thing together and then separated it. I don't know.
utilizes energy waves akin to Ludwig, but with a color inversion. His armor looks like a sort of blend between that of the Artorias and Nameless King armor sets. And naturally, he is a monstrous wolf that we had to travel through time to in order to
What?
face, so we can reach a
Wait.
pitch.
Does it? It doesn't look like Artorias at all, does it? I mean, I guess a little, but like, I mean, it's kind of similar. Whatever.
And Nameless King armor sets. And naturally, he is a monstrous wolf that we
Maybe
had to
I'm
travel
fucking dumb, but I never thought any of those things. Yeah, not really.
through time to in
I
order
mean, I
to
guess
face,
the Nameless King thing with the hair, but whatever.
so we can reach a pitch black natural-born evil that the gods themselves tremble in fear of. Yeah, does that sound familiar? Oh, but the fan service doesn't stop there. Maliketh's face.
What? Hang on. Okay. So is that the problem, that Maliketh is just
a sort of blend between that of the Artorias and Nameless King armor sets. And naturally, he is a monstrous wolf that we had to travel through time to in order to face, so we can reach a pitch-black natural-born evil that the gods themselves tremble in fear of. Yeah, does that sound familiar? Oh, but the fan service doesn't stop there. Okay. Malekith's Phase 2 cutscene is utterly caked in cinematography reminiscent of Ludwig and Artorias' respective boss cutscenes.
No.
We get the shot of him kneeling as he just sort of quietly ponders what to do next before building to Ludwig's iconic Phase 2 shot, except this time
Fuck, I can't believe they made it cool. 0 out of 10.
it's inverted with the sword pointing down. And we even get the stretched, wolf-like stance of Artorias. They really went all out with the fan service here. I don't blame anyone for thinking that Maliketh looks absolutely badass. However, to me, he comes off as a very try-hard attempt at hollow fan service and more closely resembles an edgy Berserk Souls OC than he does any of the iconic bosses that his design is trying to emulate. Look, I'm sorry, but to me it just looks like middle school Miyazaki's edgy Berserk OC. Please don't steal. I feel like Maliketh belongs in Code Vein more than he does Elden Ring. At least a try-hard fan service would suit that game, but even still, his design is just...
Yeah, totally. Yeah, not out of place at all.
It's
Slap
so
that right
over
in there.
the top. But hey, look, even if a
No, I'm
boss
on board with this guy now. He's a genius.
his visual design was a complete train wreck, what really matters is how well it plays. Unfortunately, FromSoft completely jumped the shark with this one, and the boss fight is one of the most insufferable in the entire game. But let's be fair and start with the Beast Clergyman, Maliketh's first phase.
Okay, now
the Beast
we're
Clergyman is yet another hyper-aggressive and large boss with attacks that often come so fast.
I was gonna try to do the bit where I agree with him, but he really didn't say anything interesting for like a whole minute, so...
Be forgiven for thinking that he's animation canceling. His projectiles are also quite fast and even possess lingering hitboxes, and naturally, he also comes equipped with an AoE that triggers 3 consecutive times.
I gotta speed him up again. Just like...
Because of course they do. It was around this point in my playthrough where it felt like From had all but given up and dropped all pretenses of trying to craft a truly distinct boss and decided that every quote-unquote hard Elden Ring boss was just going to have the exact same abilities, just with different animations. He's just another large enemy jumping around and dishing out rapid attacks and AoEs. There's nothing to distinguish his first phase from really anything else in the game, mechanically speaking.
True.
It's just... more Elden Ring.
Loveless, you just don't want to have to learn all the boss's movesets.
What's
Me when Elden Ring has Elden Ring in it. Fuck.
to learn? They all have the exact same abilities, just with different animations. But the issue isn't just that he has a bloated and overtuned moveset. The Beast Clergyman is also fast, and I mean very fast. He can dish out multiple attacks.
I don't know. Can we let's just do Malenia? I don't know. I thought this would be more... Oh, Radagon might be interesting. I don't know. I can't even like take this seriously to a certain extent. It just seems so ridiculous. Plays Elden Ring, looks inside. It's Elden Ring. Fuck. Return the game. Oh, right. Full cutscene.
Followed by the Elden Beast, which, as many of you are likely aware, is kind of, not good, instead of good. But to be perfectly honest, I don't really know what it is that people see in Radagon, because to me, for lack of a better term, he's probably the most unga bunga boss I think I've ever seen, and no, it's not just because of the hammer, hear me out. Radagon's first phase is surprisingly basic, which feels strange given he follows Maliketh and Godfrey. I mean, there's also Sir Gideon, but, I mean, come on. His moveset is a fairly straightforward blend of melee and magic, primarily relying on hammer swings and slams with the occasional use of AoE magic, teleports to reposition, projectile...
You just showed yourself fucking that up.
Of melee and magic, Maliketh and Godfrey. I mean, there's also Sir Gideon, but, I mean, come on. Primarily relying on hammer swings and slams with the occasional use of AoE magic, teleports to reposition.
Wait, what the fuck even just happened there? Do you like cut in a split second of a different attempt?
Forward blend of melee and magic, primarily relying on hammer swings and slams with the occasional use of AoE magic, teleports to reposition.
Yeah, he did. That's so... okay.
And projectiles, and...
It really looked like another attack was happening there and he got hit by it.
That's pretty much it for his first phase. He's really simple. Like... distractingly so. I get that there is more to come, so they probably felt it was necessary to exercise some restraint, but like, I don't know, I don't think he had to be quite this simple. I mean, he's pretty inoffensive, he's not particularly bad or anything, but like, do you have any idea what...
I think it's fine. I guess he is... Phase 1, Radagon is a bit of a step down from Phase 2, like Maliketh, but like... I I don't know.
Kind of shit I had to face just to get here? I mean, was this really what all the hype surrounding Marika and Radagon was all about? I know that probably sounds insane coming from me, given I've criticized many of Elden Ring's bosses for having ridiculously over-the-top antics, but, like, you can at least understand how I would find this a little bit jarring, right? Of course, there is also his second phase, and this is unfortunately where I feel the problems really begin to surface. So, Radagon's phase 2 is pretty much just his first phase, but with AoE slapped onto almost everything he does, and I really mean almost everything. Even his teleport has AoE damage tacked onto it, and that's pretty much all there is to say about it. I'm really not trying to sound like a reductionist, but that really is all there is to the fight. His melee is pretty easy to read, which I guess is nice, and his...
Okay. Alright.
They always take a bit of getting...
I mean, like, what... The whole fucking Radagon thing just contradicts everything else he says about every other boss.
Used to, but once you figured those things out, you've pretty much automatically won the fight. His second phase really is obnoxious, though. It's as if they really couldn't think of anything remotely interesting to do with him, so they just decided, alright, we're gonna put AoEs on basically every one of his attacks. Oh, and the teleport too, because why not, you know? His teleport has an AoE, his most basic melee attack...
I mean, the teleport is pretty nuanced in how it works. There's different, like, speeds of it that he can use. I don't know, I think it's pretty interesting.
Attacks have AoEs, his bolts have AoEs that go off moments after they hit the ground. Even his command grab has an
positioning stuff. Wow, hey, it's quite a bit harder.
AoE that will affect other players and summons. AoE, EI, fucking O. I guess part of what makes him so tolerable is the fact that...
Okay. I don't know. I mean, like...
He can be staggered and even afflicted with debuffs while also having a fairly
standard doesn't like AoEs.
Pool of health. Some of his attacks do have some annoying
delays,
but...
fucking Promised Consort.
But they're nothing compared to this game's most notorious offenders. When it comes down to it, once you nail the dodge timings, the fight's a bit of a cakewalk, and a pretty brief one at that. I don't know, this fight is just really, really low energy, and it's kind of disappointing. Now, obviously, I'll take this over...
Radagon, dude. Can we get somebody to make a Trump AI voice meme about Radagon being low energy?
Obnoxious bullshit like Maliketh, but it's important to remember that this fight happens right after...
He does have a video just on Promised Consort Redone,
Godfrey, and is the penultimate fight in the game. Ironically, in a game that never seems to know when to say enough was enough, FromSoft ended up showing perhaps a bit too much restraint with Radagon, likely because they wanted him to be directly linked to the Elden Beast. Full disclosure, it wasn't worth it. I really do wonder what they would have done with Radagon if they had been willing to have it, so you didn't have to challenge him again.
I definitely didn't feel that way about Radagon at all. He took me a long time, even without, like, getting to the Elden Beast. For the first time.
The Elden Beast. Obviously, with this being a back-to-back boss, they had to show some degree of restraint, but it didn't need to be a back-to-back boss in the first place. Why not just have Godfrey, followed by Radagon?
I really can't say anything other than just, like, I feel like it's just not true. Radagon's cool as fuck. I don't know. Sorry, you didn't feel the same way. Okay, Malenia. Right, full cutscene.
Blade of Meequella and Goddess of the Accursed Scarlet Rot. And to be perfectly honest, I can't even be mad about this boss. I'm just disappointed. Disappointed that the character whose statue I received with my collector's edition of this game could be so canonically badass, and yet so poorly realized on a mechanical level. Disappointed that the boss which would inevitably come to define Elden Ring would be the very embodiment of the design problems that surface throughout many, many, many boss fights. Disappointed that after all these games have worked to achieve, this is the end result.
Absolutely
bodying the prior to the DLC, that is. But perhaps what I find most disappointing of all is that Maleenia is so close. She is so close to being a genuinely great boss, but because FromSoft downright refused to pump the brakes and recognize when enough was enough, Maleenia, Blade of Meequella, turned out to be the game's most defining boss for all the wrong reasons. Maleenia, the Blade of Meequella, is known for being hard, and yep, she sure is. If you want to refer to her as the hardest boss ever, at least prior to the DLC, be my fucking guest. I know difficulty is subjective, but you would be hard-pressed to claim any other boss in this game prior to the DLC comes even close to the difficulty of Maleenia. If ever there were an example
of a boss, I feel like a lot of Malenia's difficulty is the psychological effect that Waterfowl Dance has on you.
Elden Ring's base game that was designed with the sole intent of being as impossibly hard as the developer can manage, Maleenia, Blade of Meequella, is that boss. It is abundantly clear that they wanted her to be Elden Ring's pinnacle challenge, again, before the DLC. Maleenia, Blade of Meequella has...
And also, like, the RNG of getting really unfortunate second phases where she uses it, like, a few times in a row.
Everything, and I mean everything at her disposal. Calling this fight skewed would honestly be underselling it. Her damage output is absolutely outrageous. Her combos sometimes never even seem to have an end to them. Her area coverage almost completely blankets the entire...
You should attack her, because you can stop them really easily.
Arena. Her punish windows are absurdly slim and sometimes even deceitful.
That's like actually the point of Malenia, kinda. That's what you're supposed to do. Well, if you're playing melee anyway, I don't know.
Be a plentiful once you learn.
If I paid $200 for a statue of a FromSoft boss and wasn't able to beat said boss, I would feel pretty stupid. Yeah, well, remember, I feel like all of this has to be... We already watched the fucking embarrassing Rennala section.
So, like, that's really all for all but her two most powerful attacks. She has the power of God and anime on her side. Maleenia, the Blade of Meequella, really is the embodiment of Elden Ring's design philosophy.
He consistently pronounces Meequella. Not only wrong, but he pronounced it right earlier. Fuck. I swear to God, these videos are specifically designed to make me kill myself.
The first issue that many are likely to notice, but not quite grasp, is the strange rhythm of her attacks. Maleenia has a frankly bizarre mix of speed, tracking, and delays in certain attacks that feel as if they are designed specifically to throw you off. Many of her telegraphs look alike, or require you to discern the exact...
They are. A lot of things are designed specifically to throw you off because the game's supposed to be hard. Yeah, you knew this when you started playing it.
Time at which she's performing the windup so as to determine her next move and how to avoid it. Furthermore, certain combos come out so rapidly that you will literally need to preemptively dodge one attack in a way that allows you enough time to avoid the follow-up attack.
Good.
I hope I don't need to tell you just how frustrating...
Like, cool shit. Gaius is the same way with his, like, big fucking 6 or 7 part combo or whatever it is. I don't even know how many parts it is because you don't have to actually dodge everything.
And inconsistent it can feel to be punished for not being able to think multiple steps ahead against a boss this fast and oftentimes unpredictable.
But I'm not done yet.
A lot of things in Elden Ring are like that. I just thought of Gaius in particular because I watched my video about him earlier today and I thought that part of the fight was sick as fuck.
Some of you are likely wondering if Maleenia can be parried. After all, humanoid foe wielding a sword makes sense to be able to parry. Plus, it would be nice to have a consistent method of punishing the boss, even if it would require regular use of a high-risk playstyle. Thankfully, the answer is yes. She can be parried, but also no. See, here's the thing. You can actually parry Maleenia. Unfortunately, if you were hoping to get a riposte from it, you know, an actual reward for this risky play, you're going to need to parry her 2 more times. Because parrying...
Oh no. Oh no. Fuck.
Her doesn't actually function as a parry so much as a dedicated
Isn't
stance
every
break.
boss like that? Don't you have to parry all bosses multiple times to get a riposte? I haven't parried much in Elden Ring, so alright, cool.
This has to be one of the most artificial ways of inflating a boss's difficulty that I have ever come across.
Only this boss though, because you didn't even try parrying, I'm guessing, for any others. Sweet.
Right up there with Malekith's Destined Death. Hey, Earth to the people who've been designing these games with this mechanic since 2009. In case you weren't aware of it, parrying is already a high-risk technique to try and apply to a battle, let alone a fight against a boss.
Once you get parrying down, it's not that high risk.
With as much speed and damage output as Maleenia. The risk of punish and the skill floor to land even a single successful parry on her are already extremely high, so making it to where she will only open up for a riposte after a whopping 3 parries is absolute nonsense. Either include the mechanic properly or don't include it at all. This is not the middle ground that I'm sure you thought it would be. Not only does this triple the risk of the player taking a lot of damage, in some cases potentially fatal damage from multiple hits in a row, just for trying to land a single punish, but this also means putting yourself at major risk of letting Maleenia heal herself. Because for some reason...
You really just... Okay, like Malenia... You really have to be aggressive because you can stun her out of like 90% of her moveset. There's like a couple things that you can't. The sideways dash, actually, I don't remember exactly which ones you can and which ones you can. But if you've been fighting her like for a few attempts, you get a natural sense of it, or you should. I don't know, I do. Whatever, maybe I should make a video about this someday.
Reason or another, FromSoft decided that Maleenia, the Blade of Meequella, also gets the benefit of healing.
You should just fight her and observe what she does. Like, it's not that hard to figure out. Attack her when she's doing different combos and figure out which ones work and which ones don't. Most of them work. Most of them you can just cut her off when she's about to hit you and you're fine. And that's kind of the point.
Herself every time she attacks the player. Well, okay, that's actually not entirely accurate. You see, the thing to understand about Maleenia, the Blade of Meequella's healing, is that it isn't vampiric by design. She doesn't actually feed off your health. She just feeds off the impact of her sword. All that Maleenia, the Blade of Meequella, needs to do is connect with an attack and she will heal from it. You can be completely blocking all of her attacks, but she will still heal from attacking you no matter what, as long as her attacks connect with some part of you or your summons. However much damage she does or does not inflict isn't even a factor in whether or not she gets to heal. This completely invalidates shields and borders on invalidating spirit ashes altogether. Blocking her is already risky because of her sheer speed, damage, and ferocity, even with great shields, but the fact that she actually gets to heal off of these attacks basically renders shields into an active handicap to even try and use against her. Considering half the appeal of this game is the player freedom and build variety, this would seem to run rather counterintuitive to one of the core design philosophies of
she's a super optional hidden boss, I don't know. That's fine.
This game, would it not? Again, I understand not every build is going to be especially effective against every single boss, but you would think that one of the most defining bosses of the game would allow, in some capacity, for you to utilize every other mechanic. They're outright invalidated, at least not to the same degree as shields. The fact that the AI is as bad as dodging as it is can lead to some extremely frustrating moments where the summon is basically just feeding Maleenia's health. What's worse, she can even heal by attacking spirit ashes and summons after they have already died. I hope I don't need to explain why that is complete bullshit. As far as her moveset goes, her more basic sword swipes, lunges, and stabs are pretty straightforward. If anything, they actually kind of remind me of Lady Maria. She has a couple of combos, a guard-breaking hit, a helm-breaker, a stinger. You can pretty effectively gauge these kinds of attacks just by looking at her, and there's little about her basic moveset to actively criticize. I should also note that her hitboxes are, at least more often than not, pleasantly airtight, like, impressively so. However, one attack that I'm not as tolerant of would have to be her grab. Maleenia, the Blade of Meequella's grab is really finicky, and there's 2 reasons for this. The first is the telegraph. Not only is it really fast, but the actual animation is deceptively similar to her forward lunging animations, like when she's about to use her stinger or the uppercut. It might seem easy to spot the difference when watching the video or if you've played the game enough times, but in the heat of battle when you're actively trying to think ahead and manage your health, magic, stamina, equipped weapon,
it's really easy to dodge. The only times I get hit by that is when I panic dodge.
So on. This kind of split-second animation can really throw you off if you happen to read it wrong.
It doesn't look similar to the thrust at all, in my opinion. I've always been able to recognize it. Like, that's never been the problem with me getting hit by that attack before.
Loveless, that sounds like a skill issue. You really need to get good.
No, it just sounds like you're fucking stupid. Like, I don't... Do you have something wrong with your eyes? You said you had glasses earlier.
With her grab is the tracking. Malenia, the blade of Meequella, has a major problem with tracking the player to the ends of the cosmos, but it is really noticeable here. I said a while back that Elden Ring's smaller and more humanoid bosses rarely look bad when they track, at least while they're on the ground. For the most part, you won't really notice this kind of thing because your brain just shrugs it off as an adjustment of footing or the enemy using the sheer force of their swing to turn their body. Not here though, and given the sheer degree of punish, it can be pretty damn frustrating to get caught when it looks as if the game is so blatantly going out of its way to kill you. It's important to remember, this is Elden Ring.
I just hate it when people say shit like that. The game is always going out of its way to kill you. That's what it does. It's a game based on combat. I don't know.
Late game. Malenia's grab does enormous damage and heals her for a massive amount of health.
Just like, I have to like make a list of these phrases that people use to just like support their argument that like don't really mean anything.
Pretty much guarantees that you'll need to heal, so when an attack this powerful connects in such a cartoonish way, it can really feel like it's
it all ties
way to
into
screw
that
you out of a valuable resource. Perhaps the one saving grace about Malenia, the blade of Meequella, is the fact that her health bar is pretty small compared to most of Elden Ring's late game. The fact that she heals is really obnoxious, but if your damage is high enough, it will only get her so much back. And hey, for what it's worth, she can also be staggered, which itself will open her up to further punish if you're able to coordinate your attacks well enough. Obviously, you'll need a thorough understanding of her moveset and not to mention your own to pull this off, but at this point in the game, if you're not familiar with your own moveset, then frankly it's a miracle you made it this far. Unfortunately, her phase 2 has its own health bar, and while it's not especially large, this kind of thing just
says the guy who fucking raged over fucking Rennala.
Really annoys me at this point. I want to acknowledge that this is completely subjective. I'm not trying to pass off the in-game super boss having a second health bar as an objective flaw. However, I think there is still a nugget of a point worth tackling here. For the most part, FromSoft has
you like literally you're trying to say get good in not in so many words, but all right, this fuck yeah.
Track record for not going too crazy with bosses having multiple health bars. For the most part, they're pretty rare, and when they do appear, there's usually a clear purpose, and it's usually to achieve a certain effect. Sister Free, for instance, had 3 health bars. However, none of them were particularly big, and the second phase gave you 2 enemies which shared that one health bar. As hard as Sister Free is, the health bars are never really an issue, and it was genuinely surprising when it happened. Soul of Cinder would be another boss with a second health bar. However, that second health bar has about 2/3 the health of the first, and it was more about the fact that it was channeling Gwen in its dying moments. This was an effective moment, even for more casual fans of the series, and overall, it was just a brilliant wrap-up to the story of Dark Souls. As far as Elden Ring is concerned, the only other bosses besides
hit by that, he wasn't far enough away.
Maleenia, the blade of Meequella with multiple health bars were Rennala, Rykard, and Radagon the Elden Beast. Even the DLC made it a point to avoid multiple health bars on all but pretty much one boss, and that one was optional. Rennala is kind of weird, narratively speaking, since you don't actually kill her, even though you do get her remembrance. And with Rykard, you were fighting a certain first with
Ooh, I bet he's mad about that.
Rykard only awakening when the situation proved dire. It was essentially a second entity within the same body, and the body itself is canonically ever regenerating. For Radagon and the Elden Beast, they are obviously 2 separate entities, so that obviously checks out. These bosses all had a certain spectacle factor to them that I would imagine is fairly obvious. Maleenia, the blade of Meequella, retains the spectacle factor, but there's nothing about this second phase transition which seems to have any sort of intended effect other than the typical this is where the real boss fight begins, which is already an idea present in plenty of other bosses just within this game. Anyone familiar with Elden Ring's lore will know of Maleenia and Radagon's battle, and how Malenia awakened her goddess form to defeat Radagon and his army. Beyond that, did anyone seriously select first phase while adding in a couple of new attacks?
Is this
her behavior is comparatively far more aggressive, so if you thought that her first phase was rough, you have seen nothing yet. There are 2.
Is she more aggressive in phase 2? I never notice like an increase in aggression because I'm always fucking attacking her on every single attack that I can stagger her out of. Okay, she is? Alright.
2 new moves in particular that can be extremely devastating if they manage to connect. The first of these attacks sees her flying upwards to a position that you won't be able to punish her from without some form of ranged attacks, which itself needs to be pretty fast. From here, Malenia will fire out a handful of phantoms to attack the player before finally coming down with a massive stinger. These phantoms will go for their own slashes, stingers, helm splitters, so on and so forth. They deal extremely high damage, but more importantly,
you can punish safely more too. Yeah, okay, maybe that's...
Importantly, they reveal a significant issue with Malenia's second phase, that being her wings. Malenia's wings are downright cluttered with what must be hundreds of actively animated details. The sheer volume of butterflies and particle effects can often make reading her attacks more difficult than it really should be, because now you also have to try and catch the
I just don't have that problem, really.
nuances in her animations through this mass of scarlet butterflies which blend very easily with both the arena and Malenia's various rotted details. It's also worth noting that these wings don't always look fantastic themselves, at least with how they animate, with Malenia's wings awkwardly pointed straight up her back despite how her body may sometimes be bending or twisting, both from her own attacks as well as stagger received from player attacks.
Yeah, I think it would be really difficult to make them look good from every angle that she can be. I don't know, sorry.
Is that once you see it, you can't really unsee it. The second of these attacks is an AoE dive bomb where she flies once again into the sky before going out of her way to hone in on the player as she comes crashing down. Not only is this attack difficult to dodge,
going out of her way to hone it, why would she... Oh my god.
Without what is essentially an AI exploit where you go beneath her and force her tracking to fire her off in another direction, but
she didn't awaken her goddess form to beat Radagon, she just bloomed. She needed to bloom once more to hit goddess tier. I'm pretty certain there was a description somewhere that mentioned her need to bloom one more time. Yeah, that's true.
she will always start the second phase of the fight already suspended and ready for the dive bomb. I hope I don't really need to explain this, but it can make for a very cheap gotcha moment which serves no other purpose than to frustrate the player and cheapen the initial phase 2 transition even further. When she lands, a massive scarlet flower petal will run from Malenia, dealing absurdly high damage and dealing moderate damage over time to those within its range over the next few seconds, all the while simultaneously afflicting Scarlet Rot. Scarlet Rot is one of the game's most potent status afflictions, so having it be inflicted in the latter portions of a fight this difficult can feel a bit extreme, though for what it's worth, the build-up is far from instantaneous, meaning unlike most other punishments in Malenia the Blade of Meequella's fight, this one is pretty definitively on the player should they happen to find themselves afflicted. It's a method for preventing greedy punish off a seemingly highly punishable attack, but not to the point of outright negation, so that's definitely appreciated. If anything, it feels more like an opportunity to gather your bearings, which in a fight like this was desperately needed. Plus, for what it's worth, ranged players can take full advantage of all this time that she spends planted in that position.
Good for
this
them.
is great, but also doesn't change the fact that Malenia's sheer aggression and area coverage will typically invalidate this kind of playstyle for the majority of the fight. But at the very least, sorcerers will have more than just ranged casting to take advantage of by this point in the game, so, you know, that's something. And I guess with all of that, now it's time
yeah, man.
for me to finally talk about it. You already know, we are now...
I'm gonna slow it down a little bit for waterfowl. I really,
Waterfowl
okay.
Dance. Let's start with the animation itself. Waterfowl Dance is probably the most highly telegraphed attack in the entirety of Elden Ring, which might seem like a blessing initially, but the fact that Elden Ring is actually giving you such a confidently
It's also a great way to kneecap any summons you're relying on. Yeah, true.
large window to anticipate an attack should be all the tell you need to understand what's about to happen.
Which again is fine, because like she's optional, very out of the way, secret, etc. Intentionally very prohibitively difficult.
Extremely punishing. The telegraph for Waterfowl Dance sees Maleenia leaping into the air and holding her position, completely defying gravity as her character model, despite not even being in motion, turns to maintain a lock on your position for the duration.
Gravity. Fucking
Charge up. So she has yet to even swing her sword, and already this attack has problems. Beyond the visual of her character model turning both horizontally and vertically depending on your position, the extent of her lock onto you conveys with rather abundant transparency that this attack is meant to kill you at all costs. FromSoft
whoa, fuck, man. Wow.
Really wants you to know that this attack is among the strongest in the game, and they could not care less about how ridiculous it looks. Nor do they care just how obviously they're skewing the fight in favor of the enemy. It's as if they've
yeah, which they've never done before.
Completely abandoned any notion of designing their game to be even remotely fair and just want it to be known that they made a really hard boss. I really want you guys to pay attention to this wind-up. It's hard to pay critical mind to this kind of thing in the midst of an intense boss battle, but seriously, look at just how blatantly she's been locked on to the player's position. It is fascinating to me just how blatant FromSoft was with this particular wind-up. After the initial wind-up, Malenia, the Blade of Meequella, will blitz towards the player with a flurry of slashes that encompass her.
It's just like, I don't even understand this point. Like, yeah, I don't know, they have good tracking.
Character model completely, all the while turning even in the middle of her dash so as to ensure she strikes as close to the player as possible. The tracking is at its all-time worst with this particular part of Waterfowl Dance because to this day there are only two fairly reliable ways of avoiding taking damage from this first dash.
No, it's at its best actually because it's so accurate.
She'll likely be able to intuit without some sort of tip or just Googling a straight-up guide. And yes, you heard me correctly, there actually exists guides solely for dodging this one specific attack.
Yeah.
It really is that bad. It is honestly incredible to me that FromSoft went so far out of their way to...
That doesn't really sound that extreme to me. There's like, that's been a thing. Like I used to play World of Warcraft. Like people have been doing that shit with raid bosses since that game came out. For particularly difficult moves.
Convey just how bullshit their attack is, but couldn't be bothered to try and actually convey a means of avoiding.
And those are games that you can teach each other in real time because you always play them with other people.
Is defending yourself against said attack. But you know, I guess that's the result of prioritizing sheer difficulty over balanced design, right? Anyway, the first method for avoiding this first dash is to simply run away. That might seem kind of obvious, but you have to understand that this is really only doable if you're already at a notable distance from Maleenia and you've managed to read the attack. If you try running from a close range, guess what? You're dead. Most likely off this one dash alone. It is possible to outrun with a head start, but you also need to have a fair amount of space in the direction you're running. Otherwise, you'll just hit a wall. Oh my god, could you imagine if Maleenia, the Blade of Meequella, healed just by hitting walls? I mean, she can heal off of shields and corpses, so hey, why not at this point?
Oh, come on, Loveless, you and I both know that would be unfair bullshit.
That sounds like a skill issue to me. Why don't you try getting good? The second means of avoiding the waterfowl dance's first dash is to run at a slight angle directly beneath Malenia.
Maybe we'll revisit this guy, because, I don't know, that was a lot of fun.